Chapter 61, Kine versus Hawkeye. Come on, Kine waved at Hawkeye. Whoosh! A verdant slash tore through the air, aimed straight for Kine's face with lightning speed. Oh my, you really aren't holding back. A red light flashed in Kine's eyes, and his body blurred like a ghost, narrowly avoiding the blade by a hair. He dodged, but the ice beneath them could not. The slash cut through several meters of thick ice as if it were butter, its momentum undiminished until it vanished over the horizon. Crack, crack, accompanied by a bone-jarring roar, the ice field split open into a bottomless chasm, and surging seawater roared out. Sanji's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. His voice trembled in disbelief. Just a casual swing, and that much ice was cut in half? Is this something a human can do? The boy's worldview shattered. Reiju's face went grave. This is a new world monster. Her future would sooner or later encounter enemies like this. Yamato, Kane called. Yamato understood. Frost energy erupted around her, a bone-chilling current sweeping the sea. In seconds, the fissure refroze, and the surface became solid once again. This is bad. Our commotion's getting a bit too loud. Kine scratched his head, annoyed. Hawkeye snorted, black blade angled. If I can't use my full strength, what's the point of this fight? You're right. Kine's lips curved into a wild grin. It's been a long time since I got to let loose. Before he finished, he stomped, shattering the ice beneath him and rocketing into the sky like a cannonball. Dazzling green light burst from his body, as if a small sun had ignited. Whoosh! The light exploded into green sparks like scattered stars, and the god of the sky soared through that brilliant galaxy. The clear sky was swallowed by heavy, leaden clouds. Lightning snakes writhed within them, electric light flickering as Kane vanished into the rolling thunderheads. Dozens of sharp verdant slashes followed, cutting the clouds into rents that were immediately sealed by the dark mass Kane controlled. Under Kane's command, the clouds churned, gathered, and compressed like a living thing. The last trace of daylight was swallowed. The world fell into a suffocating dusk. A low thunder rolled deep inside the clouds. Thunderbolt! In an instant, countless terrifying pillars of lightning, thick as buckets, tore through the darkness and slammed toward Hawkeye on the ice. Lightning of this scale? Hawkeye's eyes blazed with sharp fire. His fighting spirit flared. Only by defeating such an opponent will my blood truly boil. His wrist flicked. Yoru, the black blade, blurred into a shimmering screen. Streaks of sword energy that could cleave sky and earth surged up to meet the bolt-like lightning. Bang! 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 Explosions thundered continuously. Scattered lightning like golden snakes struck the ice and blasted charred pits. The ice couldn't take it. One after another, huge, blackened hollows opened up. The ice field groaned under the bombardment, finally giving way. Crack! The surface exploded into hundreds of floating chunks of ice. The violent impact churned monstrous waves, making the huge Rayquaza bob and sway helplessly. Hawkeye released his haki to pin the ice beneath his feet and steady himself. Oh! Worthy of disaster, Kane! Fire! On the Beretti, a short, middle-aged man with a camera frantically pressed the shutter toward the battlefield. The flash popped repeatedly. Reiju noticed him only when the shutter clicked beside her. She frowned, on guard. Who are you? Just a passing photographer, he answered casually, his lens glued to the field. Following Hawkeye was the right call, he thought. The man nicknamed Fire Snap was ecstatic. Sanji had no time for the stranger. His gaze was fixed on the fight, his pupils reflecting the world-shaking spectacle, as if he wanted to carve it into his memory. Disaster, huh? Fitting name. Lightning seems to have limited effect. Kane peered down from the clouds and murmured. Hawkeye below looked disheveled, but wasn't truly injured, only a bit drained. If that was all, it was time for another move. Kine's thoughts shifted. The rampant lightning in the clouds went out, and a cold whiteness took its place, countless tiny ice crystals condensing madly. A bone-chilling wind swept across the world. Hiss, so cold. Violet shivered and hugged herself. Isn't it summer? Could it be? Speed craned his neck, looking up. Only Lord Kine could do something like this. Yamato, however, smiled contentedly and narrowed her eyes. So comfortable. Does Kane have this move too? As a user of the Uguchi no Makami fruit, she loved this kind of cold more than anyone. On the ice field, Hawkeye immediately understood Kine's intent. Trying to numb my senses with cold? Kane, you underestimate me. He stood tall, Yoru poised, but Kane knew the cold that made Violet shiver wouldn't faze Hawkeye. He had to raise the stakes. Icy wind, a freezing storm howled down from the heavens. Where it passed, the air screamed as moisture was ripped away and condensed into a dense rain of ice and electricity. The storm engulfed Hawkeye. Crack! In an instant, the world's greatest man became a crystal sculpture. The freezing wave didn't stop. It surged like a rolling white giant and swept outward. The floating ice shards refroze and reinforced. Even the Rayquaza and Barati were caught. Their hulls froze to the sea under thick ice and frost crept over the gangways. Bang! The ice statue shattered and Hawkeye broke free. His wrist was stiff, slightly frostbitten. He was at a disadvantage. In expert dueling, the slightest injury can be fatal. Not only are your techniques varied, but their power's impressive, Hawkeye muttered, but his fighting spirit only burned more fiercely. Kine transformed into his hybrid beast form and landed on the ice field with a boom. The surface cracked beneath him, and the impact flipped the whole chunk of ice. Black and red Conqueror's hockey coiled around him like electric snakes. He streaked forward as a green blur. "Take down! Taste my move, my hawk!" Kine roared. "Come on!" Hawkeye's eyes erupted in unprecedented brilliance. He gripped Yoru tightly. Black and red hockey crackled wildly along the blade. He swung with ferocity. The next instant, man and weapon met, except the clash didn't land as a simple collision. An invisible barrier seemed to erupt between them, and violent hockey slammed and squeezed within it. At the center of the conflict, a small void like black nothingness opened. Materialized hockey lightning ripped outward like a tidal breach. The ice layer, fragile as crackers, tore into countless fissures. Huge slabs of ice were hurled aloft by the shockwave and then slammed down, spraying seawater everywhere. Two black and red hockey pillars shot into the sky and smashed into the clouds. The heavy darkness above tore open like a curtain. The sun reappeared. Warm light fell on the turbulent sea once more. The sky tore open. Sanji's voice was dry. He was speechless with shock. "Hawkeye can do that too?" Yamato wrinkled her nose. Urgency flared. She needed more training to keep up with Kine. At the field's center, the shockwave finally faded. Hawkeye was hurled into the surging sea like a cannonball, while Kine was flung violently into the air by the massive recoil. Kine tumbled but steadied himself, looking down at the churning water with a knowing smile. As expected, you can use Haoshoku Haki, Mihawk. Although Kane's memories of his past life had no note showing Hawkeye had Haoshoku on his Viver card, it made sense. Someone called the world's strongest would have it. "Are you distracted?" Kine thought. Almost at once, Hawkeye roared, and a pitch-black blade came at him. Kine swung his claw to meet the strike. Boom! A massive airwave exploded, forcing another great swell. The two were shaken apart and landed on floating shards of ice. This time, Hawkeye had no elegance left. Drenched from the sea, the white tuft behind his hat clung to his neck and water dripped from the brim, but his hawk-like gaze burned brighter than before. Kane licked his lips, an excited, wild smile on his face. This was the first time he'd met someone so evenly matched. Their hockey was on par. In raw strength, he had a slight edge, but in sharpness of attack, Hawkeye was superior. Of course, Hawkeye's smile was firm. Although Kane wasn't a swordsman, he relished this even contest. The testing of skill and will. The last time he'd felt like this was facing red-haired. Boom, boom, the two shot out like cannonballs again. Black blade and black claw collided, separated, and clashed again amid shattered ice and surging waves. Each strike detonated with thunderous roars and airwaves. The once calm East Blue now felt like one of the New World's fiercest seas. Even the enormous Rayquaza, tossed by the aftershocks, looked like a small boat in a storm, all hope of steady control gone. Fortunately, the combatants deliberately avoided the Rayquaza and the Barati's positions. Otherwise, those ships might not have survived. They can really fight to this level? Violet clung to the trembling rail, eyes fixed on the battle, unwilling to miss a moment. Kane will definitely win, Yamato declared confidently. Why? Violet asked, expecting some secret. Because he's Kane. Yamato put her hands on her hips, as if it were obvious. Violet pouted. I really don't know what kind of spell Kane put on you. She forced herself to watch and silently prayed for Kane's triumph. At the heart of the fight, within minutes, Kine and Hawkeye had traded dozens of blows that could split mountains and seas. They struck and parted repeatedly, each landing on a slab of broken ice, chests heaving, breaths ragged. How about a final blow to decide the winner? Kine smiled. As you wish. Hawkeye's lips curved. Kine's verdant body turned pitch black and red hockey lightning coiled around him. Hawkeye's pupils tightened. The aura across from him had shifted. Mihawk, take my strongest attack. Double edge. Kine flashed an excited grin and vanished, leaving nothing but shattered ice and a widening sonic boom. Hawkeye gripped Yoru with everything he had. Belief, will, hockey, all poured into the blade. Hockey lightning surged along the metal with unprecedented intensity, scattering uncontrollably and blasting water pillars into the sky. Then they collided with full force. Time seemed to stop. After the impact, the sea within several hundred meters of the strike collapsed like someone had struck a giant bowl into the water. Countless tons of seawater were shoved aside into monstrous waves that towered and raced outward in every direction. It's a super tsunami! On the Baradi, Patty and Carne clutched each other, tears and snot streaking their faces as they wailed, "It's over. We're definitely going to die this time." "Idiots," Zeph said without expression. "People always die." But then relief replaced terror. Ice Fang, Yamato inhaled deeply and released a thick blast of icy breath. The blast swept the area around the two ships. In seconds, the monstrous waves froze into a giant circular ice sculpture. "We did it!" Violet hugged Yamato, jumping up and down. "Yamato, you're amazing!" When the mega wave had hit, Violet had been so scared her legs went weak. "Piece of cake, I'm Yamato," she said, giving a thumbs up and proudly wiping her nose. Chapter 62, Recruiting Sanji. On the distant battlefield, the two of them hovered above the scarred earth. "Heh heh! It's been a long time since I met an opponent who made a fight this enjoyable," Hawkeye said, floating in midair using his moonwalk. He looked utterly disheveled. His black top hat was gone, his clothes shredded by the last exchange of blows, revealing a lean, scarred torso. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. His sword hand trembled and could barely lift his blade. Even someone as unrivaled as him had been badly hurt by Kane's devastating strikes. The feeling's mutual. Kane hovered opposite him, coughing blood, looking even worse off. The double-edged style Kane used inflicted massive damage on the foe, but also returned a third of that damage to the user. Without the monstrous constitution granted by his mythical zone, Kane would never have risked such a trade-off. "Let's stop here." Hawkeye glanced over the ruined battlefield. "There's no point in continuing." "Agreed." Kane nodded. A further fight would have been a fight to the death, not a spar. There was no need. Before they left for Raikugo, Kane still had one practical concern. He flicked his wrist toward the sky. Sunny day. The gentle sunlight suddenly intensified into a furnace-hot blaze. The wall of ice they'd been fighting around needed melting. "My hawk, want to come aboard my ship to change?" Kane called. "No need. I have spares." Hawkeye waved his hand, his tone as unflappable as ever. He always traveled prepared. When they reached the dock, Hawkeye's coffin-shaped small boat lay in splinters. All that remained of his vessel were a few broken planks. On Raikugo, Kane laughed until he clutched his stomach, tears nearly pouring from his eyes at the sight. Hawkeye's expression darkened. "Who told you to destroy my ship?" "Oh, my mistake. I won't take the blame for that." Kane wiped the corners of his eyes, then stopped the teasing. "We're about the same size. I'll lend you my clothes. Let the doctor bandage you up." Hawkeye took the offer without protest. Men's fights, he thought, were a straightforward way to communicate. He didn't dislike Kane. Kane had been a worthy opponent. After their wounds were dressed and they changed into the clean, casual clothes Kane provided, they headed to the Barati. Kane still had a table full of food waiting for him. He even had a plate ordered for Hawkeye. "Boss, put this on my tab. He's a pauper now." Bang! Hawkeye slammed his black blade, knight onto the table. "Are you done yet?" Hawkeye's face darkened again. Coming back with Kane suddenly seemed like a mistake. In the corner, a freelance photographer who'd been eavesdropping trembled with excitement, his pen dancing across his notebook. "Big news, earth-shattering big news. President Morgans, you have to give me a bonus for this." "My bad." Kane's apology was perfunctory at best. Violet, delicate and composed, scooped a spoonful of fragrant seafood fried rice and offered it to Kane. "Kane-sama, try this. The flavor is very unique." Almost at the same moment, Reiju speared a small piece of seared steak glazed with amber honey and fed it to him from the other side. This honey-roasted steak is delicious as well. Kane accepted both offerings with a satisfied grin, eating as he was fed. The sight of him being spoon-fed by two women made Hawkeye, whose hands were sore and clumsy from the fight, briefly wonder. Never before had he had the same thought. Maybe he should get a maid. He dismissed it quickly. By the way, Kane swallowed and fixed his gaze on Hawkeye. Why are you here? Hawkeye set down his water glass and took a steady sip. The food here's good, he said matter-of-factly. Kane remembered then that Hawkeye was not only a fearsome swordsman, but also a skilled cook. Perhaps they were men with mutual appreciation for good food. Hawkeye cared for cleanliness, cooked well, and even grew his own vegetables, a surprisingly domestic man beneath the fearsome reputation. The plates on the table emptied at an alarming rate. Kane and Hawkeye ate with a certain elegance, but they devoured too, especially after a major fight when replenishing energy was urgent. The Baradies' kitchen was thrown into a frenzy. Steaming dishes would arrive and be returned empty within seconds with a metallic clang. Zeph, watching it unfold, realized Kane hadn't been exaggerating. He worried aloud whether there would be enough food on the ship, but eventually the mountain of plates showed they had eaten their fill. The taste is really good. Kane patted his round stomach, satisfied. Yeah, it's great. Yamato slumped in her chair without caring for appearances, smiling broadly. The chefs on Raikugo were decent, but not Zeph level. No wonder Hawkeye came here to eat. When everyone had finished and the last plate was cleared, Kane waved a hand. Sanji. Sanji came over wearing his usual smile. Brother-in-law, what can I do for you? Sanji. Reiju's pretty face flushed, and she swatted her brother on the back of the head. Don't be ridiculous. Kane chuckled and stopped Reiju gently. You're my woman, so Sanji's not off base. He turned serious and fixed Sanji with a direct look. Do you want to come with me? I really like your cooking. Sanji froze. Kane's invitation took him by surprise. He had always thought of himself as a cook who loved the galley, maybe influenced by his sister, but he looked to Zeph, the man who was both teacher and father to him. Idiot. Zeph smacked Sanji's head. What are you standing there for? Why aren't you jumping at a chance like this? Have you forgotten the dream you always talk about? Finding the legendary All Blue. At the mention of All Blue, a bright, burning light flared in Sanji's eyes. Then it dulled as his gaze dropped to Zeph's heavy wooden leg. Stupid old man. If I leave, who'll take care of you? Hey, brat! The other chefs barked in unison, their shouts filling the room. Zeph gave them a sharp look. You bunch of fools. I'm not that old yet. His expression softened as he turned back to Sanji. His voice went low and earnest. Go. Leave this place. A good man shouldn't be trapped here. Take my dream with you. Go find it. He turned away then, shoulders lifting as if to hide the fact that he couldn't bear to look Sanji in the eye any longer. Old man. Sanji's voice came out thin, his nose stung, and a rush of mixed grief and warmth flooded him. For a moment he stood there, torn between duty and the dream he'd always cherished. Chapter 63, Journey to Shimotsuki Village. An hour later, Sanji stood at the edge of the Rayquaza's deck with a small pack slung over his shoulder. He took one last look at the giant fish-shaped sea restaurant that held so many memories. The Bharati chefs had gathered at the railing and shouted up to him, their voices carried by the sea breeze. Sanji, you brat! If you get the chance, come back and see us! Don't you dare die out there! I will, Sanji called, but he didn't look back. He was afraid that if he did, seeing the companions he had spent so much time with would stop him from taking another step. Instead, he waved hard and high, both a farewell and a vow. Then Zeph's figure appeared on the second deck of the Bharati, his voice low and rough. Don't catch a cold. Sanji froze. The bitterness and gratitude in his rose so suddenly he couldn't hold it back. Tears filled his eyes and spilled down, plinking onto the deck beneath his feet. Old man Zeph! He turned around, dropped to his knees, and kowtowed deeply to the man who had raised and saved him. For a long time, thank you for taking care of me. On the Rayquaza's deck, Kane watched quietly. He sighed and murmured to Reiju beside him, Your brother met an extraordinary father. Reiju said nothing. She didn't know whether to feel happy for Sanji or sad for him. Kane then addressed Hawkeye. Mihawk, Our next stop is Shimotsuki Village. Are you coming with us? Or should I drop you off at a nearby island with a shipyard? Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman, had suddenly become something of a pauper, so Kane's suggestion was practical. Shimotsuki Village? The Shimotsuki from Wano. Kozuki Hiyori, still wrapped in bandages over the upper body, glanced over with interest. Kane nodded. Kozaburo Shimotsuki, the Kozuki family's great swordsmith, fled Wano more than 40 years ago and settled in the East Blue. He founded that village. What matters isn't the village itself, Kane continued. It's that he once forged 2 great-grade swords. I'd like to ask him to forge a great-grade sword for you. They could have consulted Kozuki Sukiyaki, but he was advanced in years now. The best he could manage these days were skillful grade blades, the level of sword Hiyori currently wields. They were hoping Kozaburo still had the strength and skill to hammer out a great-grade weapon. If not, the only other option might be heading to Moria. Ryuma Shimotsuki's Shusui had become a black blade, but many swordsmen prefer an original forging. No one likes a second-hand marriage certificate, as it were. Black blades are a bond between swordsman and sword, and a lot of pride and ceremony go into that. Hawkeye's interest was piqued. A swordsmith who can forge great-grade swords? I'll come along. A true swordsman did not just master techniques, he understood the blade he held. Talking with a smith of Kuzaburu's caliber could teach him something no sparring ever could. Besides, being aboard the beast's ship was hardly a concern for Mihawk. He had little interest in how others might misinterpret it. Kane grinned inwardly. Having the world's greatest swordsman tutor Hiyori for free was a bonus. Consider it education paid in expertise rather than coin. The next morning, the ship's calm was shattered by a ferocious roar. Kane, I'm going to chop you. Hawkeye, normally composed and cold as ice, came storming after Kane with his black blade raised. Kane ran, utterly bewildered. Whoa, Mihawk, calm down. What the hell happened? It's your damned mouth. Mihawk snapped through gritted teeth. I spent my whole life shaping an image, and you ruined it. Kane blinked, more confused than ever. Violet, curious, picked up a copy of the World Economy News that had fallen where Mihawk had flung it in anger. She read the headline and immediately smirked. Kane had some justification for his panic. Shocking! Because of one man, Shichibukai Dracule Mihawk goes bankrupt. The article detailed Mihawk's supposed financial ruin after an encounter with Kane, complete with photos. In the pictures, Mihawk wore ill-fitting clothes and sat at a table looking troubled, an expression he never actually wore, while Kane pointed at a table of food and motioned that he would pay. The reporter implied Mihawk had sunk so low he could only eat if treated by a friend. The sea chase ended without bloodshed. Mihawk lowered his sword and resheathed it with a gloomy look. Kane laughed aloud while holding the paper, but 2 chilling, murderous glances from Mihawk shut him up. Kane hurriedly straightened his face and offered an excuse. It's all that damn bird who stirs trouble. I'll take care of him for you. You? Forget it. I'll do it myself, Mihawk said coldly. Kane silently crossed Morgans off as a goner. The king of news had always put sensation over safety. From another angle, one could admire his journalistic integrity. Flowery phrasing aside, the facts had a kernel of truth, but becoming the target of Mihawk meant Morgans would have a rough time ahead. After that comic uproar, a week passed, and lessons began on deck with teacher Hawkeye. To forge a black blade, Mihawk explained, simply nurturing it with armament haki is the most basic requirement. Many swordsmen can use armament haki, yet black blades are rare. Why? Hiyori asked. Because many swordsmen are not sincere enough toward their swords, Mihawk replied. Sincere? Hiyori frowned. Do you mean I have to pour all my feelings and will into the sword? In a sense, yes, Mihawk said slowly. You must treat your sword as a loyal companion that resonates with your soul, one you would share life and death with, rather than a cold, replaceable tool. Yamato, seated cross-legged nearby and cradling her spiked club, Aegean, listened with wide, shining eyes. She made a bright, immediate connection. So could Aegean be forged into a black club? Mihawk's expression darkened. He felt the absurdity of a club wielder asking a swordsman about black blades. Still, he took a breath. Theoretically, it's possible, but I've never seen it done. Yamato was not discouraged. She puffed up with pride. Then I'll be the first. Hehe, Ajian, we're going to get stronger together, she whispered earnestly to her club, and for the first time in a while, the stern swordsman allowed himself the faintest flicker of curiosity. At least, she truly regarded her weapon as a companion. Chapter 64, Shimotsuki Village and the Revolutionary Army. Light, quick footsteps came from the ship's cabin. Everyone, thanks for waiting. Sanji appeared on deck, spinning smoothly like a whirl, balancing a huge silver tray. Several colorful, crystal-clear drinks on it caught the sunlight, beads of condensation running down the glasses and giving off a refreshing fruity mint scent. Come on, try my latest creation, the East Blue Summer Fantasy Special Blend. Sanji's face shone with that confident smile as he handed out drinks, matching each person's taste precisely. Oishi! Kane gave a thumbs up. If it had been any previous kitchen crew, they couldn't have pulled off something so fancy. That's great, big brother Kane. Sanji scratched the back of his head, pleased. Ever since Reiju had given him a firm talking to, he'd been acting differently. Violet, who had been on lookout, walked up then. Kane, Shimotsuki Village, is straight ahead, but there's still a marine surveillance ship tailing us. Kane's recent clash with Hawkeye had made a lot of noise, and it hadn't taken long for the East Blue Marine branch to take notice. A marine scouting ship had been stalking the Raikugo from a distance, trying to stay out of sight. To Violet, with a sight range of 4,000 kilometers, their attempts were child's play. Let them be, Kane said with a casual wave. Pushing them away now would only make it look suspicious. They could tail them anywhere, except Shimotsuki Village. Letting the Marines see them land there would be an open invitation for trouble. Kane didn't realize his lax attitude would soon cause a huge problem for people on the island. Shimotsuki Village, Ishin Dojo. Koshiro, the dojo master with a ponytail and round glasses, sat in the tea room talking with a visitor. The last batch of food has been safely loaded onto the ship, Dragon. You can relax. Koshiro poured matcha for his guest. The man opposite him wore a dark green coat, had short black hair, no visible eyebrows, and several red square marks on his left cheek. He lifted the cup, inhaled, and said lightly, Koshiro, your tea ceremony has gotten better. This was Monkey D. Dragon, the world government's most wanted man and leader of the Revolutionary Army. You flatter me, Koshiro said with a modest shake of his head. Besides teaching my students swordsmanship, I don't have much else. You've made a notable contribution to the revolution, Dragon corrected. The steady food supply from Shimotsuki Village has helped us greatly, Dragon said quietly. They were speaking in low tones when hurried footsteps broke the quiet. The paper door was flung open with a swish and a huge painted face squeezed in. He had enormous dark purple hair piled up like an explosion, heavy stage makeup, and wore a tight, plunging jumpsuit with fishnet stockings. Emporio Ivankov, one of the Revolutionary Army's founders and commander of the Grand Line forces. Dragon, bad news. The beast pirates are about to land. And worse, our lookouts have spotted a marine surveillance ship. Ivankov was frantic. A clash with the beast pirates wasn't what worried him most. With Dragon present, they could put up a fight and evacuate if needed. The real danger was the Marines tailing them. If the pirates and the Revolutionary Army confronted each other on the same island, the Marines would undoubtedly prioritize hunting down the revolutionaries. To the world government, pirates were a nuisance. Revolutionaries were an existential threat. Dragon's expression went grave. Koshiro, get everyone into the shelters immediately. Now! The gentle smile left Koshiro's face. The soft eyes behind his round glasses sharpened like a blade. Understood. Koshiro sprang up, yanked a katana from the rack, and strode out with purpose. He would protect this small island with his life if necessary. What about the food ships? Dragon asked Ivankov. Have they already departed? If not, hide the supplies at once. Ivankov nodded hard. No worries. The emergency plan went into effect as soon as we learned of it. We unloaded the food and hid it in the old cache. Good. Dragon breathed a little easier, then added, we should go into hiding ourselves. First, find out what the beast pirates and the Marines are aiming for. As long as there wasn't an all-out battle, disappearing would be the best protection for the villagers. At the island's only port, Koshiro, after sending the villagers to safety, hurried ahead with Kane and the others. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Why had the beast pirates come to the East Blue, to this small, obscure island? There was only one answer he could think of: Shimotsuki. A huge beast pirate's ship was docked quietly, gangplank down. Huh? It's so quiet, a bold, puzzled voice called out. Yamato had leapt from the high rail and was already inspecting the empty dock. We're pirates, you dope, Kane grumbled. Any pirate flag struck fear into the eyes of common folk. But there's someone there, a swordsman. Yamato pointed out Koshiro like she'd just found a new continent. Hey, old man, do you know where Shimotsuki Kozaburo is? It's Kozaburo, Kane corrected, rubbing his forehead. They were here for the Kozuki family? Koshiro's suspicions hardened. He drew his sword and leveled it at Yamato. I don't care what you're after. If you mean harm to the villagers, you'll have to go through me. Oh, Hawkeye narrowed his eyes, a faint smirk on his lips. Swordsmen still exist in the East Blue? This was the right place to come. Swordsmen and their resonances found each other. The stronger they were, the stronger the pull. Koshiro's breath caught. Hawkeye, what are you doing on a beast pirate's ship? He recognized the world's strongest swordsman at once. After all, you're descendants of the Kozuki, the family of the dragon-slaying samurai, Shimotsuki Ryuma, Kane said. Kane's words made Koshiro's heart drop. If the beast pirates had come with someone like Hawkeye, their force was terrifying. What do you want? There's nothing on this island worth taking. Kane waved a finger. Maybe not treasures, but talents are as valuable. Like Shimotsuki Kozaburo, your father, a master swordsmith from Wano. And a green-haired boy who could become the world's strongest swordsman, Kane added, indicating the young swordsman with 3 blades who just vanished, a thought that tightened Koshiro's grip. You want to take him back? That should be a Wano matter, Koshiro said, voice rough. Kane nodded and introduced the woman beside him with a sweeping gesture. That's Kozuki Hiyori. We mean no harm. We only want to visit Kozaburo. Kozuki Hiyori stepped forward with graceful composure. Mr. Koshiro, please trust us. We have no ill intentions. We only seek Mr. Kozaburo. Kane shrugged. If we meant harm, you'd already be dead. Do you really think you could stop us alone? Koshiro forced a bitter smile and slowly relaxed, sliding his sword back into its sheath. He wouldn't be foolish enough to think he could take on both Kane and Hawkeye. Unless dragons stepped in. But then the Revolutionary Army's supply lines would be jeopardized, and the Marines wouldn't let the island go. Lead the way. I'll take you to my father, Koshiro said. They hadn't gone far when a group of students suddenly blocked their path. Teacher, we're here to help. The dojo disciples, who should have been sheltering, stood shoulder to shoulder in the road, a ragged line of youth and old, faces anxious yet brimming with resolve. Who told you to come back? Koshiro barked, angry and worried. Teacher, we want to fight with you, another cried. How could we let you have all the fun fighting pirates? The youngsters chorused, excitement and bloodlust bright in their faces. Kane stroked his chin. You teach your students well, Koshiro. Interested in joining the beast pirates as a sword instructor? Koshiro's face remained stony. I'm doing fine right here. A sharp-eyed child suddenly froze and pointed. Isn't that him? The strongest swordsman? I'd know him even if he turned to ash. There was an audible intake of breath. To the students, meeting Hawkeye was like staring up at a final boss in a beginner's dojo. Even Hawkeye's expression twitched at their bluntness. Wait, where's Zoro? Wasn't he with you guys? Koshiro asked, noticing one of his best pupils missing. Zoro was the kind who'd rush in headfirst, not run away. Where did Zoro go? The students muttered, bewildered. Far in the forest, the green-haired youth gripped all 3 swords and cursed at the sky. Damn it, which way to the port? Meanwhile, Koshiro guided Kane's group across the village to the cliffs. A lone wooden hut sat on the edge. There, Shimotsuki Kozaburo, a man with a single thick eyebrow, an old dark green kimono, a pipe, and a long sword at his hip, sat fishing with no fish in sight. Kane circled him briefly and confirmed it. He hadn't caught a thing. Hey, kid, why are you looking at me like that? Kozaburo snapped, annoyed. It's not that I can't catch fish. I just have 5 don't catch rules. Got it? He launched into a long, eccentric lecture about not catching small fish, not catching pregnant fish, and other oddities. So you don't catch anything at all? Yamato blurted, bewildered. Laughter filled the air. Kozaburo's face reddened, and he flung his rod down in a huff, then turned to Hiyori. No need to ask. To tame Enma, you must do it yourself. I forged Enma, but I can't give you shortcuts. Swords have personalities. They have individuality. The one who makes them obey is the swordsman, he added, the dignity of a master smith showing as he spoke. Hawkeye nodded slightly, impressed. This was a man capable of crafting a great-grade sword. Kozuki Hiyori didn't speak. She calmly drew Enma from her waist. In her hands, Enma seemed obedient, almost aware. Kozaburo's look softened and then sharpened. I never thought I'd see someone who could handle Anma in my lifetime. What's your name? Kozuki Hiyori. Kozuki? The Kozuki Sukiyaki? He asked. He's my grandfather, she replied. Kozaburo shook his head, lost in the memory, then asked the reason for their visit. Kane said plainly, "We want you to forge a great-grade sword for her." Kozaburo sighed, looking at his withered hands. "I can't swing a hammer like I used to. The best I can make now are good-grade swords." Kane showed no resentment, no threat, just calm acceptance. "That's a pity. We apologize for the trouble." Koshiro let out a secret breath of relief. The tension that had been coiled in his chest loosened a little. It looked like Kane could be reasoned with. For now. Chapter 65, Butsu Mitama. Custom-made is out of the question. Kozaburo Shimotsuki spoke suddenly, changing the subject. "However, after I settled here, I poured everything into forging another sword. If you're willing, you can try it." "Father, that sword is Queena's memento. How could you?" Koshiro Shimotsuki blurted, then muttered, "Idiot." Kozaburo raised his pipe and gave his son a sharp rap on the forehead with it, scolding him irritably. "When did I say I was giving you the Wado Ichimonji?" Koshiro gave an awkward laugh. In his mind, his father's greatest achievement had always been the Wado Ichimonji. Kozaburo turned and opened the door to the small wooden house. A moment later, he re-emerged, holding a long, tightly wrapped object in coarse linen. With a reverent expression, he unwrapped it layer by layer. When the last cloth slipped away, a pure white katana with a straight, slender scabbard was revealed. "For the first half of my life, I always believed swords should be forged to take lives," Kozaburo said, his hand caressing the scabbard as he spoke slowly. "But after I left Wano and came to this small island, I witnessed the birth of my son. Looking at that tiny, crying bundle, I realized not every sword must be made for slaughter. Some should exist to protect. So, after settling my wife and child, I came to this cliff and secluded myself to forge a sword. After 3 months, on a night of thunder, I finished it. Just as I was about to succeed, a bolt of lightning struck the blade, completing the tempering. I named it Butsumitama." He solemnly handed Butsumitama to Kozuki Hiyori. Hiyori took it with both hands. Feeling a slight chill from the scabbard, she inhaled deeply, gripped the hilt with her right hand, and began to draw the sword. Zzzt! The blade had barely emerged an inch when Hiyori gasped and instinctively let go. "It has electricity?" "Exactly." Kozaburo stroked his beard, a blend of helplessness and pride in his eyes. "It is a sword of protection, but it also carries the power of thunder. Only those with strong resolve can wield it. Perhaps my understanding of protection was incomplete back then. That's why I forged this sword with such a strange temperament." Kane's mouth twitched. The old man had once had quite a fierce streak, specializing in forging knives with odd, dangerous traits. Hiyori, however, showed no sign of backing down. She gripped the hilt again. Like Enma, Butsumitama began to draw armament haki from her body, though far more gently than Enma had. The absorbed haki turned into arcs of electricity that struck Hiyori, but she stood firm and drew the sword inch by inch. With the experience of taming Enma, she moved noticeably faster. Finally, the sword was fully drawn. Butsumitama was a straight, single-edged blade, almost no curve at all, its body faintly alive with a purple electric sheen. Hiyori's eyes flickered. With a casual flick of her wrist, she swung toward the open sea. A massive slash, braided with dazzling purple lightning like a roaring thunder dragon, tore through the air and struck the water. Boom! A towering column of spray shot up. Within it, countless purple electric snakes writhed. When the column collapsed, the sea surface was littered with dead fish, bellies up from electrocution. Kane understood then. Elemental attacks were common in this world. Hiyori sheathed the sword, a little puzzled. "It doesn't seem to reject me. The sword chooses its wielder, just as a swordsman chooses his sword," Kozaburo said, his voice full of feeling. "It seems I found a good master for Butsumitama." Thank you, Mr. Kozaburo, for the sword, Hiyori said, bowing. No need for thanks, Kozaburo waved. For a swordsmith, every blade made with care is like a child. It's the best reward to see them find suitable masters. If you can make Enma and Butsumitama reach the rank of supreme-grade swords, I'll die content. There is no intrinsic difference in quality between supreme-grade and great-grade swords. The title Supreme Grade was earned by the reputation of their wielders. At that moment, the bushes at the edge of the forest shook violently. A green-haired boy burst out, panting. Aha! I knew I wasn't lost. The boy brightened when he saw Kane and the others. Then his eyes locked onto a single figure. Hawkeye? Zoro? What are you doing here? Koshiro slapped his forehead as if waking from a dream. No, of course you'd be here. He shouldn't have forgotten that Zoro had no sense of direction. Before Genzo could finish his complaint, Zoro had assumed his three-sword style stance and, like an arrow loosed from a bow, charged at Hawkeye. I didn't expect the appointed time to come so soon, Hawkeye. Duel me. Don't, someone shouted, but Zoro, eyes only on the world's greatest swordsman, ignored the protest. Hawkeye's eyes dropped over Zoro's face, pausing briefly on the Wado Ichimonji clamped in Zoro's mouth, then lifted again. To fight him, you had to be strong or have something truly special. Hawkeye wasn't the sort to indulge a child. Hey, you looking down on me? Zoro shouted, somehow audible even with a sword in his mouth. All right, stop, Koshiro said, grabbing Zoro before he could reach Mihawk. They're my guests. Is that green-haired idiot crazy? Sanji muttered. He wants to challenge the world's greatest swordsman now? Zoro's temper flared at the insult. Huh? You mocking my eyebrows? He barked. Sanji bristled. An eyebrow was not a thing he or his sister would allow to be mocked. What did you say? Want to fight? In an instant, the two of them were nose to nose, glaring like enraged bulls. Zoro had completely forgotten his challenge to Hawkeye. Kane couldn't help but smile. The world's greatest swordsman had no interest in two brats squabbling, and his gaze returned to Kozaburo Shimotsuki. Chapter 66, Sanji and Zoro's duel 5 years early. Kozaburo, I'd like to spar with you. Spar? Kozaburo Shimotsuki took a long puff from his pipe and, without ceremony, held out his hand. Give me your sword. Hawkeye barely hesitated. He drew the long blade from his back and handed it over. So this is Night, the supreme black blade. Kozaburo traced the steel inch by inch as if caressing a lover. He didn't miss a single detail. The almost indecent care made Hawkeye frown, as if someone else were handling his prized weapon. After a long while, Kozaburo had examined every part of Night. As I thought, he murmured, admiration in his eyes. Soft, yet firm. Your swordsmanship shows in the blade. Hawkeye's eyes brightened. That's right. Sit down, if you don't mind an old man prattling on. Kozaburo gestured toward the wooden house and invited him in. Hawkeye stepped inside. Shimotsuki Koshiro and Kozuki Hiyori, curious about the conversation, followed. For Kane, listening to talk of swordsmanship would have to wait. The real entertainment was the fight between Sanji and Zoro, which was already underway outside. It had to be said, the idea that a long inch is a strong inch still held. Sanji, who had only trained on the ship for a few days, was clearly a little hesitant facing Zoro's three-sword technique. Are we just going to watch? Reiju's worry showed in her eyes. No need to worry, Kane said meaningfully. Sanji, he's the Vinsmoke family's greatest masterpiece. Reiju's beautiful eyes widened in disbelief. That's impossible. He never showed anything special growing up, otherwise father wouldn't have. Just wait, Kane interrupted decisively. One day Sanji will surprise you all. I'm convinced of that. To activate Sanji's exoskeleton, Judge's raid suit was essential. Kane had insisted on getting the stealth black raid suit. Judge had prepared for Sanji. The suit had been ready for a long time, but because Sanji hadn't awakened his exoskeleton, Judge refused to hand it over. No suit meant no awakening, and no awakening meant no suit. It was a catch-22. On the battlefield, without his exoskeleton activated, Sanji was just a normal human. Under Zoro's relentless three-sword onslaught, he sustained several injuries within a few exchanges. Hey, curly-browed bastard! Zoro took a step back, sheathing his swords for a moment with a flash of impatience. You're no match for me. Admit it and get out of the way. I don't want to kill someone for no reason. What did you say? Sanji snapped, furious at the implication he was being bullied. If you can use swords, then it isn't cheating if I use this. He decisively pulled a black canister marked with the number 3 and clipped it into his waist. Oh, can't hold back already? Kane smiled. Henshin! A brilliant light swallowed Sanji. When it faded, he stood there clad in a black raid suit with a red-lined, black-faced cloak. Don't say I'm bullying you. I'm not turning invisible, Sanji grinned confidently. Again. Chich, you just changed clothes? Zoro couldn't fathom where Sanji's confidence came from, but the answer would come in the fight. He charged again, his 3 blades forming a terrifying net of steel that lashed at Sanji. Clang! 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 The blades rang against Sanji, but instead of tearing through, they met metal and sparks flew. To Zoro's surprise, his slashes left only a few faint white streaks that faded almost immediately. Sanji placed his hands on his hips and laughed triumphantly. Wah! This is the power of technology. Damn it! Zoro's frustration ran deeper than the insult that Sanji had used equipment. He was angry that his strength still wasn't enough. If he couldn't even beat someone his age, how could he face Hawkeye? I was saving this for Hawkeye. He planted his feet and spun his 2 swords like a windmill, whipping up a gale. Now, I'll let you taste it first. 3-sword-style secret technique, 3,000 worlds. With unstoppable momentum, he surged at Sanji. Sanji narrowed his eyes and sprang forward, shooting the tip of his foot straight at Zoro's gut. Abdomen, shoot! Zing, zing, zing! Cutting sounds and sparks filled the air. In the next instant, a green-clad figure flew backward and slammed into the grass some distance away. Sanji remained where he was, slowly withdrawing his leg. The raid suit had only taken a few shallow cuts that vanished quickly under the suit's memory metal. Just as I thought. Kane was not surprised. The level of defense the raid suit provided was far beyond what the current Zoro could penetrate. Defeat had been inevitable. In gaming terms, Zoro was a late-game hero, unremarkable early on, then explosive after years of hard training. In his youth, he had lost to Quina over 2,000 times. Even accounting for Quina's prodigious talent, Zoro's later surge in power was undeniable. But at this stage, the gap between him and someone wearing Judge's raid suit was enormous. Cough. Damn it, is the gap really that big? Not far away, Zoro propped himself up on his sword, coughing, a smear of fresh blood at the corner of his mouth. The pain in his abdomen made it almost impossible to straighten, but he forced himself back into the 3-sword stance. Sanji frowned. Do you still want to keep going? That was your trump card. You should know the gap. It's a chasm you can't cross right now. So what? Give up just because the enemy is stronger? Zoro shouted. I lost to a girl 2,001 times, and I'll lose another 2,001 times if I have to. It doesn't matter if I die trying. I'll get stronger. I will become the world's strongest swordsman. It was his promise to Quina and to himself. He wasn't the kind to refuse to admit defeat. He refused to stay defeated. Could a man give up on himself for a few losses? Roronoa Zoro would never be that man. Hey, Kane, I kind of like that guy now. Yamato nudged Kane's waist with her elbow. Zoro's indomitable spirit reminded her of herself. Kane nodded slightly. In his previous life, many had admired Zoro for that unyielding will, and he was no exception. On the battlefield, Sanji gave a soft laugh. He pressed a button at his waist, and the raid suit unmade itself into a canister, which he slipped into his pocket. You really are something, he said. It wouldn't be fair to keep using the suit. He lifted his right leg and planted his stance. Let's continue, on the understanding that only one of us will be standing. Just as I wanted. Zoro grinned broadly. Chapter 67, A Conversation with Dragon Bang. Sanji and Zoro froze after one last brutal clash, standing back to back on the grass. For a few beats there was only silence, then both of them collapsed at the same time, as if every ounce of strength had been drained. Sanji, Reiju cried, rushing to her younger brother's side. Yamato, take them and get them treated first. I'll be there in a minute. Kane sent Yamato and the others away, then walked alone into the deeper part of the forest. A few kilometers on, in a secluded hollow ringed by tall trees, he stopped. He didn't look around. He merely tilted his head and fixed his gaze on a point in the air. Come out, revolutionary, Monkey D. Dragon, he called. Only the leaves answered, rustling in the wind. Kane stood his ground with calm confidence, as though waiting out an opponent. After a moment, a breeze shifted, and a man slowly took shape within it. How did you find me? Dragon's voice was low, laced with genuine surprise. Since Kane and his group arrived on the island, Dragon had been keeping himself entirely in the form of wind, observing from above, and not even using observation hockey. To anyone else, he would have been nothing but a gust. No one should have been able to spot him. He had relied on this method countless times and never been uncovered, until now. Because of the wind, Kane said with a faint smile. My power controls the weather. Wind is part of the air. My command of it isn't necessarily weaker than yours. Dragon's camouflage had been flawless, but his long streak of success had made him slightly complacent. He hadn't fully merged with the natural breeze. To Kane, who could sense disruptions in the air, Dragon's presence looked like a sudden whirlpool in a calm river, impossible to miss. Kane had also enabled his precognition ability and already knew Shuangyu Village had ties to the Revolutionary Army, so he'd kept his guard up. With preparation against surprise, Dragon had been exposed. You called me out for a reason, Dragon said bluntly. Since Kane had already named him, he didn't expect a fight. Kane didn't hedge. Give me Bartholomew Kuma's contact information. Dragon's brow tightened. It wasn't surprising Kane knew of Kuma's connections. Kuma and Dragon had worked together in revolutionary efforts, and Kuma had been seen by many, but still. Why? Kane stroked his chin and offered a tempting deal. Your revolutionary army is short on weapons, right? Weapons from the beast pirates. Good and cheap. I can supply them. Dragon's answer was immediate and firm. The revolutionary army will never betray its comrades for profit. Kane chuckled. What if I told you I could cure Bonnie's sapphire scale disease? Dragon stiffened. A mole in the revolutionary army? The fact that Bonnie had the sapphire scale disease wasn't a public secret, but it wasn't widely known either. Her condition had only become apparent this year. Are you serious? Dragon asked. Since Bonnie's illness was discovered, the Revolution's doctors had been helpless. A Dr. Dragon had met by chance had even diagnosed her and predicted Bonnie might not live to 10. Ivankov's Horohoro no Mi could help, but only at a terrible cost, sacrificing years of Bonnie's life for a slim chance of recovery. No one wanted that for a 5-year-old unless there was absolutely no alternative. I'm serious, Kane said confidently. If it's curable, I'll cure her. Afterwards, you can bring her to me for a full examination. Bonnie's ailment was a nightmare for ordinary medicine, but devil fruits can produce miracles. Between the Chiyu Chiyu no Mi, the Opa Opa no Mi, or even an advanced use of the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi, a solution might be found. And if nothing else worked, Kane could seek pure gold. Olga had once extended her life by 206 years using it. With it, Bonnie's life could be extended by millennia. Dragon hesitated. Kane's confidence put him in a dilemma. Trust a member of the Beast Pirates, or let a possible cure slip away. Kane added one more weight to the scale. You wouldn't want Ginny's fate to befall Bonnie, would you? That was moral blackmail, and it hit hard. After a long pause, Dragon took a deep breath. I don't have the right to decide for Kuma. I'll need his consent before I give you his contact. Do that, Kane said without argument. Dragon studied him for a long moment, then turned into a gust and vanished, shaken by something Kane had revealed. The encounter had rattled him more than he expected. When Zoro opened his eyes again, the familiar grain of the dojo ceiling was all he saw. This is the dojo. Why am I here? You're awake. A handsome face leaned over him, wearing a mischievous grin. The operation was a great success. Congratulations, you're officially a girl. What? Zoro bolted upright with a practiced fish-like motion, but a sharp jolt of pain in his chest made him grimace and slump back down. His body was wrapped in bandages from chest to waist, blocking his view. Ha! Kane laugh erupted. You fell for it. The laughter broke Zoro's tension. He realized he'd been tricked, and his face darkened with fury, veins thudding at his temple. You bastard! Kane wiped tears of mirth from his eyes, straightened and sobered his expression. Enough jokes. Want to join my crew? Zoro blinked, speechless. How could he, a nameless kid from a tiny East Blue village, be offered a place in the Emperor's crew? He'd spent his life in Shuangyu Village training with the sword, mostly oblivious to the wider world. But he wasn't completely ignorant. He knew who Hawkeye was, for one thing. The offer felt like a high school student buried in books suddenly being recruited by the CEO of a global corporation. No matter how resolute he tried to be, a thrill ran through him. Chapter 68, Zoro boards Kuma and Bonnie. Why choose me? Zoro asked. It's simple, Kuma said. I see your potential. I believe you can become the world's greatest swordsman. I'll give you a platform to train and to reach that goal. Follow me, Kuma coaxed, and you'll see the widest seas and the strongest enemies in the world. Zoro's eyes brightened as he listened. What ambitious swordsman wouldn't want to roam the world? I'll go. He was impatient by nature, and an orphan besides. The only thing on this small island worth remembering was Quina. As long as Wado Ichimonji was at his side, he didn't care where he sailed. Then it's settled, Kuma grinned. Another seed planted. Excellent. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, the duel between Hawkeye and Koshiro Shimotsuki had ended. Hawkeye's clothes were a little disheveled, but Koshiro Shimotsuki had a long gash across his chest and was bleeding heavily. You're not bad, Hawkeye said, sheathing his sword, an unusual compliment from him. It's rare for the East Blue to produce a swordsman like you. With your talent, a few years in the New World, and you could be a great swordsman. Hawkeye sensed Koshiro Shimotsuki's lack of real combat experience. His ability came from natural talent more than battlefield knowledge. Koshiro sheathed his sword, clutching his wound, and shook his head. I don't have that ambition. This is probably as far as I'll go. He let his disciples bandage him. When Koshiro finished, Zoro came to find him. Teacher, I've accepted Kuma's invitation. What? Koshiro's glasses nearly flew off. He looked at Zoro in disbelief, hoping it was a joke. Zoro's face was serious. I've decided to join the Beast Pirates. I want to see broader horizons and stronger enemies. Only then can I get stronger. Koshiro took a deep breath and forced down the urge to strike him. He wasn't against Zoro going to sea. Good men should see the world. But this was absurd. Zoro hadn't even left the village and wanted the endgame already. Zoro, Koshiro's voice rose, stern and fierce. You don't understand anything. Do you know what the Beast Pirates are? Do you know what a terrifying abyss the sea called the New World is? He set out to teach Zoro the horrors of the New World. The Beast Pirates are one of the 3 most powerful forces in the New World, rivaling the Whitebeard and Big Mom crews at the top. Those crews have countless powerful fighters and monstrous strength. Any captain from there could make havoc in the East Blue. Koshiro paused. Where you're going, cutting mountains with a single strike and cleaving seas with a sword aren't empty words. They're reality. Zoro grew more excited as Koshiro spoke. Can humans really reach that level? I must see it. No, I must reach it. Koshiro's face darkened. Maybe I should hit him. Why is this brat so stubborn? But looking into Zoro's fearless eyes, he sighed. Zoro, once you join the Beast Pirates, you must be prepared to die at any moment. The storms of that sea are no joke. I understand, teacher. Zoro's gaze was steady. I'll die on the path to strength if I must. That's my resolve. What more could Koshiro say? He bore the ache in his chest and rose slowly. Perhaps you can't fully grasp this yet, but this is the last thing I can teach you. Koshiro went to the corner and pulled out an iron rod as thick as an arm, setting it upright on the floor. Everything has a rhythm, a breath. When you can sense and master that breath, you can cut anything. A flash of sword light like a startled swan, then the upper half of the iron rod slid down and clanged to the ground, the cut surface smooth as a mirror. This is the realm of cutting steel. He sheathed his sword, then took a thin sheet of white paper and held it suspended in the air. A swordsman who can cut steel can also choose not to cut paper. Another swift flash of blade passed. Zoro's eyes fixed on the sword, gliding over the paper. The sheet fluttered as if dancing in the wind, then settled back into Koshiro's hand unharmed. This is the great swordsman. Koshiro sheathed his sword and breathed out. Watching Zoro's stunned face, some of the old frustration eased. Beyond that is forging your own black blade. A hint of wistfulness crossed Koshiro's features. That I cannot teach you. You must learn from others, like Hawkeye. His sword, Yoru, is a black blade. That's all I can teach. Koshiro sank down, pressing at his chest. The demonstration had aggravated his wound, and he winced. Thank you, Genzo-sensei. I'll keep it in my heart. Zoro bowed deeply. As he stood and reached for the door, Koshiro called after him. Live, Zoro. Don't worry, teacher. I will never fall before I become the world's greatest swordsman. Zoro lifted Wado Ichimonji high. I'll do it for Quina too. At the same time in Sorbet Kingdom, at a small church outside the city, Wah! Run! The vampires are going to eat us! 3 little boys screamed and fled toward the entrance, pursued by a small pink-haired girl in patched overalls. She chased them, angry, then stopped at the doorway, put on a mock-friendly face, and shouted, "Goodbye, you brats! Don't come back!" The boys skidded to a halt, changed their tune, and taunted, "Nya nya nya! You can only chase us this far, Bonnie!" "Brats!" Bonnie scowled and raised her foot to kick, but a large hand with a paw pad on the palm gently caught her ankle. A very tall man with dark curly hair and round glasses used a soft voice that didn't suit his size. "Bonnie, please don't go out, okay?" "Don't worry, Papa, I won't go out. I don't want to see you sad." Bonnie took Kuma's hand and answered obediently. The 3 boys had scattered the moment Kuma appeared. "Bonnie," Kuma hugged his daughter and nearly cried. "Ah, you're such a crybaby." Bonnie wrinkled her nose but didn't pull away. The Den Den Mushi on Kuma's desk buzzed. "Hello?" "It's me, Dragon," came the voice. Chapter 69, Windmill Village. "Really? Did he actually say that?" Kuma kept confirming, with the Den Den Mushi fashioned to look like Dorag, and 2 hot tears slipped down his cheeks. It was the first time since Bonnie fell ill that someone had guaranteed, with such confidence, that she could be cured. Click, the call ended. Bonnie put her hands on her hips, cocked her head, and asked, "Dad, why are you crying again?" "Mr. Dorag found us another doctor. Maybe he can help you get better faster." Kuma hesitated before answering. He didn't want to promise too much. What if Kane couldn't cure Bonnie either? He didn't want to give the little girl hope only to have it snatched away. That would be too cruel for a 5-year-old. Shuangyo Village, port. The sea breeze tasted faintly of salt. Koshiro Shimatsuki held Zoro's hand and rattled off last-minute instructions, pouring all his overseas survival knowledge into the boy, whether Zoro caught it all or not. "I'll take care of myself, Master," Zoro said, eyes reddened, nodding solemnly. Koshiro bowed to Kane. "Please take care of this child." "Don't worry, Zoro is my companion now too," Kane answered, plainly sincere. He didn't make grand promises, but Koshiro felt some relief. Kane genuinely treated Zoro as an ally, not a disposable piece. That was more than Koshiro could have hoped for. It was better than Zoro going to sea alone. The Raikugo set sail. Hawkeye did not board. He chose to remain in Shuangju Village until the new ship the villagers were building for him was finished. He preferred traveling alone, he said. Kane set the next destination. Course, Goa Kingdom. Full speed. Windmill Village was a famed attraction in East Blue, a place every traveler stopped at. The Raikugo hadn't been on East Blue long when a gentle breeze set a piece of paper afloat out of thin air. It danced on the wind and landed right in Kane's hands. He unfolded it and smiled. Kuma was about to join them. Kane wanted Kuma. Put aside his berry fruit and the unbelievable past, Kuma's gentle, loyal nature made him a prime companion. One line described him perfectly. "The world kisses me with pain, but I repay it with a song." Born a celestial dragon's slave, his beloved destroyed by those very dragons. Just when he'd finally found family, that family was threatened by those same sins. Such a life could have hardened anyone beyond recognition. Yet Kuma still clung to the dream of freeing people from the world government's tyranny. Kane didn't hesitate to take out a Den Den Mushi and dial the number on the note. Sharu Sharu. Click. For a moment, the Den Den Mushi took on the likeness of a man with black curly hair and square-rimmed glasses. "Hello?" came a gentle, eager male voice. "Kuma, it's me, Kane." Kane's voice was easy. "Is what you told me true?" Kane heard hurried breathing through the line. He went straight to the point. "Have you heard of the healing berry?" He explained briefly what the healing berry could do and promised that if it failed, he had other options. There was a long silence on the other end before Kuma asked, "What's the cost?" He didn't believe in free miracles. Kane's smile widened. "Join me, become my companion." Agreed. Kuma didn't hesitate. To him, the price was better than he'd expected. He had briefly feared Kane might demand he betray the Revolutionary Army. "Meet me in Windmill Village in Goa Kingdom. You should know the place." Kane wasn't surprised by Kuma's acceptance. In the original tale, Kuma had been ready to be converted into a weapon for the world government to save Bonnie. Click. The call ended. Kane felt lighthearted. and he casually raised a hand toward the sky. Soon a meteor with a trailing flame streaked through the clear blue and hurtled toward the Raikugo. Kozuki Hiyori, already used to the spectacle, brought down her Buto Mitama and deftly sliced the meteor into small chunks. Kane plucked a still warm shard, popped it into his mouth, and smacked his lips. A bit salty this time. Meteors carried different cosmic energies and tasted different each time. For Kane, it was like opening a blind box every day. On deck, Zoro and Sanji were each carrying heavy custom iron plates, running laps around the enormous ship, sweating and gritting their teeth. This was their most important training now, raw physical conditioning. It was the foundation of strength. Even Borsalino, who wielded the light, had a monstrous physique. "Green algae head, I'm a lap ahead," Sanji called with a grin. He had worn the battle suit many times. Though he hadn't fully unlocked the exoskeleton, his physical gains were obvious. Damn it. Zoro ground out and pushed himself harder. He'd do an extra 1,000 push-ups tonight if it killed him. Violet watched them and sighed. Seeing Zoro and Sanji drive themselves past their limits made things clear. They already held the ticket to becoming true heavy hitters. Not every powerhouse was born a monster like Charlotte Linlin. Days later, Dawn Island came into view. The Goa Kingdom, praised as the most beautiful country on East Blue, lay there. Celestial dragons had even visited it, but its beauty had been bought with the suffering of the poor. The king of Goa, like many lords, couldn't stand poverty. He drove every poor soul to a slum called Garbage Mountain. When the problem couldn't be solved, they solved the people who caused it. They dumped filth and misery beyond a high wall and enjoyed a spotless city within, conscience clear. The kingdom was surrounded on 3 sides by that high wall. Only a single great gate admitted what they called garbage, a way to regularly dump refuse and expel new arrivals. Beyond the wall stretched a ring of mountains, and on the east side of those mountains tucked a small, peaceful village. Windmills dotted the landscape, hence the name Windmill Village. Few outsiders knew this obscure place had produced several notable figures and had hosted more than a few important visitors. Now, new guests had come uninvited. It's the Beast Pirates! An eagle-eyed villager pointed at the Raikugo and shouted, alerting everyone. Windmill Village tensed. It had been years since they'd seen a pirate so major. The last had been red-haired Shanks. The village held its breath as the great ship glided toward shore. Chapter 70. As Garp's hometown, Windmill Village was tense, but not panicked. The villagers notified the chief and went about packing away valuables with a calm, practiced urgency. The orderly bustle of the villagers stood in sharp contrast to the chaos aboard the distant marine surveillance ship. How could the Beast's pirates be heading for Windmill Village? The ship's monitoring major muttered, pacing like an ant on a hot pan. Cold sweat dotted his forehead. He knew what few others did. Windmill Village was Vice Admiral Garp's hometown. Every year, Garp came back for a few days during leave, an open secret among East Blue Marines. If the Beast's pirates really decided to wreak havoc there, his career would be the first casualty. His adjutant shoved a paper at him. "We should report this to Marineford," he said. The major slapped his forehead as if to clear it. Of course, this was no branch-level problem. He sent off the report immediately. The lieutenant commander who received it at Marineford didn't hesitate. Given the personal stakes, he passed it straight up to Sengoku. Sengoku skimmed the intelligence and frowned. Kane's movements were puzzling. If he had some scheme, he hadn't shown it since arriving in the East Blue. Aside from his fight with Hawkeye, there'd been no trouble. If he was simply passing through, Windmill Village made no sense. The Goa Kingdom was the usual tourist stop. Still, a friend's hometown was a different matter. He couldn't stand by and risk Garp suffering the same fate as Zephyr. Sengoku picked up a Den Mushi and called. After a few rings, a familiar, low voice answered. "Fleet Admiral Sengoku? This is Bogart." "Where's Garp?" "He's clearing out pirate crews in the East Blue right now." Bogart brought the Den Mushi closer to the center of the action. From the other end, Garp's booming laugh cut through. "Fist Meteor," came a shout, followed by a series of explosions as Garp's little operation finished. He was never one to waste time. Sengoku didn't have to say more. The moment he explained where the Beast's pirates were headed, Garp's tone changed. "Nani!" He hung up, then barked orders. Depart for Windmill Village. Full speed. By the time the Raikugo slipped into the harbor, a small group of outsiders was already making themselves at home in the village tavern. Is there anything special here? It just looks like a normal village to me, Violet said, looking around. Kane chuckled. Don't underestimate it. This is the hometown of marine hero Garp. Makino, the tavern owner, tensed. Her eyes flicked immediately toward the lone boy in the corner. Straw hat, huge appetite, face smeared with sauce. Pirates tended to have bad timing and worse intentions, and she'd long learned to assume the worst. Makino, another plate, the boy cried, holding up an empty platter with cheeks stuffed full. Luffy, you've eaten enough. Finish up and be quick, Makino said with a sigh. But I'm not full yet, Luffy protested, oblivious. I want another plate. Kane grinned and leaned forward. Hey, Straw Hat, mind if I borrow your hat for a moment? I'll pay for his meal. Really? Luffy's eyes flashed with excitement. He handed over the hat solemnly, then added with great importance, Be careful, Shanks gave me this. It's my most precious treasure. Luffy then turned back to Makino. 3 more plates of meat, please. Makino's resignation was audible as she trudged back to the kitchen. Violet blinked. Shanks? You mean red-haired Shanks? Yeah, Luffy nodded vigorously, like he'd just been asked about a neighbor. Shanks is my good friend. Do you know him? It's rare if you don't, Violet said. He's the one closest to the Pirate King in the New World. Violet stared at Luffy in astonishment. Kane toyed with the straw hat in his hands. It was an ordinary worn thing, comfortable and threadbare, but with the blessings of Roger, Shanks, and now this kid, it had taken on near sacred significance. He turned it back toward Luffy. Here, take it back. Luffy beamed as Kane set the hat gently on his head. Then, suddenly brimming with pride, he planted his feet and shouted, I, Monkey D. Luffy, will become the Pirate King. The tavern went quiet. People looked at him with the mix of disbelief and respect usually reserved for anyone brave enough to say their dream out loud. Kane didn't sneer. Yamato gave an approving thumbs up, and the others nodded slowly. Dreams deserved weight. Kane held the hat for a moment longer, then returned it. The moment was oddly sincere, a tangible link between past and future. At that instant, a boy with black hair ambled in through the door. He looked freshly come down from the hills, still dusty from whatever errand had taken him there. He was about 10, a little older than Zoro and Sanji at that age, freckles scattered across his cheeks, wearing a red vest with the word justice printed on it, and black shorts. He froze for a beat, then his eyes went wide. Luffy, you're here, he said to the straw hat, then shifted his attention. His gaze landed on Kane and brightened like a match struck. Heavenly disaster, Kane. Without hesitation, he called out, voice full of swagger and childish certainty. Come fight me. If I beat you, then I'll be qualified to challenge Kaido, right? In the boy's mind, the plan was already complete. First Kane, then Kaido, and finally a shot at Whitebeard, steps on the ladder to becoming the Pirate King. Seaweed Head, he's just as clueless as you are, Sanji laughed. Spiral Brow, that's called courage, Zoro bellowed. Ace, are they really strong? Luffy asked innocently. He had never been one for newspapers or gossip. With Luffy's temperament, it wasn't surprising he wouldn't be interested in such things. They're world-famous pirates, Ace said seriously. Then I want to challenge them too. Luffy brightened. Do you know what happens if you challenge me? You might die. Kane watched Ace with interest. Portgas D. Ace, his target for this trip. As the son of the Pirate King, Ace certainly had the sort of boldness that invited a fight, though not necessarily at this moment. Ace, Luffy, quiet, Makino called from behind the bar, stepping forward to smooth things over. They were only joking. They're just children. Please don't take it to heart. Even an ordinary person like Makino knew how terrifying Calamity Kane could be. This was no game 2 hot-headed teenagers should pick with someone like him. They sound serious, Kane said with an unchanging smile. Right, Ace said, nodding. I'll stake my life on this. Violet's hands formed an OK sign in front of her eyes. Her face registered shock. Her mind-reading ability didn't lie. The boy really meant it. He had that reckless eagerness, almost welcoming death. Luffy, don't get involved, she warned. Ace pulled Luffy behind him. If I die, you keep training. When you're strong enough to beat them, then go challenge them, he said. I don't want to, Luffy pouted, eyes already reddening. If you die and Sabo dies too, I'll have no one left. Kane's mouth twitched. Was Luffy implying Garp was dead? It didn't matter. Given Garp's brutal training methods, it was remarkable Luffy had come out kind-hearted and sincere at all. Garp's idea of teaching ranged from throwing the boys into a primeval forest to shove them off cliffs for ropeless bungee jumps. It was almost abusive. Luffy's survival under that was a kind of miracle. All right, Kane said quietly, amused. Since you sincerely issued a challenge, I'll be generous enough to accept it, just this once. Are you going to bully a child? Violet objected, though Yamato cut her off. It's a challenge. Rank, age, none of that mattered if someone legitimately challenged you. Hiyori, watching, noticed how interested Kane was in the boy. This voyage had been about gathering talented youths. Sanji and Zoro had been picked up the same way. Great, let's take it outside. Ace's eyes flashed. Ace! Makino protested. Don't stop me, Ace said firmly. I know what I'm doing. Outside the tavern, in a clearing, Ace and Kane faced each other. The air felt heavy, as if it had solidified. Take this! Ace charged, leaping up to punch Kane in the chest with everything he had. There was excitement on his face, and a trace of relief, too. Bang! His fist struck, and Kane didn't even move. Ace landed, his right hand aching as if he'd hit steel instead of flesh. Again? Kane asked, raising an eyebrow. Ace's strength was well beyond that of his peers. He and Sabo had once fought off pirates who'd kidnapped Luffy, but against a true powerhouse, it was paltry. Frustration flashed across Ace's face, but not defeat. If anything, he grew more exhilarated. After all these years, he'd finally found someone who could kill him. He surged forward, his fists blurred into afterimages and pounded Kane. Thuds echoed as his strikes landed. He mixed kicks in with his punches until it became a relentless onslaught. Kane smiled, almost playfully. Hit harder, that's better. Ace gritted his teeth and pushed his limbs harder. For a full minute, he poured everything into the assault. Inevitably, his movements began to slow. Is that your limit? Kane asked. With a casual flick, Kane caught Ace's wrist, twisted, and slammed him down. Ace flew across the ground and hit hard, unable to put up any resistance. Ace! Luffy shouted and ran to his brother. Seeing Ace stir, Luffy released him and faced Kane. Since Ace is down, it's my turn, Luffy announced, swinging his arms in a circle. Gum Gum Pistol! His fist shot out like a fired bullet and grazed Kane's shoulder. In the next instant, Kane vanished and reappeared directly in front of Luffy. He pressed two fingers together and tapped Luffy's forehead. Whoosh! An invisible force slammed Luffy backwards into the forest. Luffy! Ace roared. Fury burst from him like an invisible shockwave, sweeping the area. Sanji and Zoro staggered, their heads swimming as if the world tilted. He has Haoshoku too, Yamato said, surprised. Isn't that supposed to be one in several million? How could someone like this come from such a small village? Violet, too, had been affected by Ace's presence. As I thought, Hiyori said quietly. The boy's potential was extraordinary. Ace didn't care about their observations. He charged again, screaming, Come on, Calamity Kane! His wide, unguarded stance made Hiyori wince. Was he trying to die? In a normal contest, being flattened in the first exchange should have been enough to admit defeat. The gulf between them was obvious. But Ace pushed on, driven by something darker than pride. Kane sighed inwardly. It was the kind of self-destructive streak Garp's upbringing tended to produce. Garp had told Ace about his parentage when he was young, heedless of the burden the name Roger's son would place on him. From a grand perspective, the great pirate era Roger sparked had its benefits. New powerhouses emerged, the world government's grip was shaken. But for ordinary people, Roger was a villain. The pirates who poured out into the world ravaged the seas like locusts. People already suffering under the world government and corrupt nobles had a new scourge to fear. Families were torn apart, whole lives were destroyed. Ace had been raised amid that boundless hatred aimed at Roger. The pressure of his lineage was crushing, and the self-destructive streak that came with it was sadly predictable. Chapter 72, Persuading Ace. Hey Ace, you really hate your father, don't you? You hate the suffering he brought to the seas. Kane had knocked Ace to the ground. Ace lay there, stunned, eyes wide. You know who my father is? Kane nodded, then dropped a bomb that left everyone around them speechless. Gold D. Roger. You know him better as the Pirate King. Gulp! The faces around them went pale. The Pirate King's son, Living in the home of a marine hero? It sounded impossible, but Kane's expression and Ace's stunned silence made it feel horribly real. Violet swallowed hard, her imagination filling in dark possibilities. As a princess who'd grown up among the powerful, she knew how tangled and corrupt whispers could be. That's right, I hate him. Roger is a scumbag. Ace didn't hide his hatred. The name Roger had never brought him pride. It had been a curse. His mother Rouge had died protecting him, and he'd grown up burdened by a legacy he never asked for. No, that's not fair, Yamato snapped. Odin's diary, Roger could be brash, sometimes wild, but he was sincere. He cared for his companions. He wasn't a scoundrel. The two of them, both sons of famous fathers, had unexpectedly begun arguing. Kane found it faintly amusing. Ace and Yamato, who in the original story had been close, now at odds over their fathers. So Ace, do you want to try and end this era? Kane asked, crouching to meet him and offering a hand with an almost casual smile, as if they were debating what to have for tea. Ace had tried to survive for his brothers. Sabo and Luffy had given him the first reason to live. Whitebeard had given him another. Kane was offering a third reason. Ace stared at the hand. He had never thought of this path. What? If you hate the great pirate era your father started so much, go overthrow it. Build a new, peaceful order. Prove you're stronger than he was. Kane's smile didn't waver. Started by the father, ended by the son. Wouldn't that be something? Better than sitting here feeling sorry for yourself. Ace's pupils trembled. The idea had never occurred to him. If he actually succeeded. Don't answer me yet, Kane said lightly. I'll be around for a few days. After a pause, he added, give me your answer before I go. Ace hesitated, then took the hand Kane offered. I'll think about it. When Kane stood and left, Ace limped away from the clearing. Ace, wait! Luffy finally stumbled out of the trees after him. They walked toward Garp Mountain, not far from Windmill Village. Ace had meant to find a quiet place to think, but somehow they drifted here. As they approached the big wooden house on the hillside, a woman with wild orange hair came out, flanked by several armed men. It's Ace and Luffy, Big Sister Dadan, one of her sharp-eyed subordinates shouted. You two brats are still alive, Dadan barked, cigarette dangling from her mouth. Saved me the trouble of burying you. Seeing them safe, Dadan's worry eased. She'd been worried when her men reported the beast's pirates had come ashore. With Ace and Luffy's temperaments, trouble was a constant risk. That was why she'd come with a guard. Get inside and eat, she ordered. Garp will be on our case if you starve, she muttered under her breath as they followed her in. You two really tangled with Calamity Kane? Dadan demanded as she shut the door and stationed her men at the gate. It sounded impossible, two kids taking on a renowned pirate and coming back in one piece. Luffy nodded without hesitation. That guy's strong. He knocked me flying. But I'll beat him someday, Luffy added confidently. Dadan felt her world tilt. You two stay put. No wandering. No arguing. She wouldn't risk leaving them out in the open, while Kane's group might still be about. Ace watched Dadan with a new clarity. The woman who always pretended to tough love the boys, who scolded and shoved them and acted like she hated them, had rushed out with weapons when she had even the faintest worry for their safety. That realization hit him in the chest. Thanks, Dadan. Thanks to all of you for taking care of us, Ace said suddenly. Shut up, you stinky brat. Dadan snapped, though her voice had lost some of its hard edge. Ace straightened, resolve solidifying in his eyes. I'm joining the beast's pirates. Dadan froze so abruptly her dropped cigarette skittered across the floor. What did you just say? I'm going to sea with Kane. I want to end my father's sins, Ace said quietly, but there was steel in it. Dadan grabbed his collar, searching his face for any sign he might be joking or scared. There was nothing but resolve. Her fingers loosened. She realized then that she couldn't stop him. Ace got the answer he wanted, and Kane's ship welcomed new guests. Two bubbles, one large and one small, slipped through the clouds and descended toward Windmill Village's pier. A red gleam flashed in Kane's eyes, and a smile tugged at his lips. Let's go welcome our friends. The bubbles popped, and two cloaked figures landed lightly on the deck of the Rayquaza. Welcome, Kuma. Welcome, Bonnie. Kane stepped forward to greet them. After several days at sea, Kuma and his daughter had finally crossed the distant South Blue, thanks to the Paw Paw Berry's uncanny long-distance teleportation. Otherwise, it would have taken months. Kuma lowered his hood to reveal a kind, straightforward face. Bonnie clutched her father's hand. The hood hid most of her face, but she was not shy. Her wide, curious eyes took in Kane and his varied companions behind him. "Are you doctors?" she asked. "No, the doctor's in the New World," Kane answered softly, then turned to Kuma. "We'll need to stay in Windmill Village for a day." "We can manage," Kuma said with a small bow. Waiting a few days mattered little compared to getting Bonnie better. Nearby, Yamato and the others had already clustered around Bonnie, eager to talk. "Wow, so cool. Are those gems on your face?" Yamato leaned close, eyes bright. Bonnie, unsure, touched the crystal-like stones on her cheeks. It was the first time anyone besides her father had complimented them. "Thanks, but if I could, I'd rather not have these," Bonnie murmured, then kicked at the deck with her toe. "I'm sick. I don't want my father to worry." "Excuse me." Sanji appeared in a swirl on the deck with a tray, offering it to Bonnie with a flourish. "Lovely young lady, please enjoy." He raised an eyebrow as if announcing something proud. "My masterpiece for today, cream chiffon cake." The golden sponge was soft beneath a thick cloud of white cream. Sanji had arranged fruits on top into an elegant butterfly. Bonnie had never seen such a pretty dessert. Her small mouth parted, she swallowed hard. Then she looked to Kuma. "Father, can I eat it?" "Eat," Kuma said with a smile, answering for her. "It's a gift from my companion." Kuma nodded, and Bonnie's eyes lit up. She took the small dessert knife, not rushing, but carefully cutting the cake into even portions for everyone. Then she picked up her slice and tasted it in tiny bites. So delicious! The sweetness seemed to brighten her. "Father, have some too," she said, standing on tiptoe to offer him a piece. "Thank you, Bonnie." Kuma accepted the cake and, after trying it, praised, "It really is good." "Right?" Bonnie beamed. "Go play," Kuma told her, smiling. Still, Kane caught the worry that never left Kuma's face. "Don't worry," Kane reassured him. "There must be a way to treat Bonnie." Under the patient care of Yamato and the others, all sympathetic to Bonnie's condition, the lively girl relaxed. Yamato waved her arms as she told boisterous tales of Wano, fighting and killing mostly, perhaps not child-appropriate, but Bonnie seemed to enjoy the rougher stories all the same. Kozuki Hiyori sat nearby with a shamisen and added to the easy, unexpected warmth. "I want to thank you, no matter the outcome," Kuma said sincerely. "I haven't seen Bonnie this happy in a long time." Kane and his companions had completely overturned Kuma's expectations of the Beast Pirates. He had arrived expecting ruthless villains and had even planned to endure humiliation to secure help for Bonnie. He had thought to leave Bonnie in the care of others in Sorbet Kingdom once she was better and stay to work for Kane. Now, Bonnie staying here didn't seem like a bad idea, but it was too soon for decisions. The next day on Windmill Village's pier, Kane watched Ace stride up with a huge backpack exactly as he'd promised. "Please let me join you," Ace said solemnly. What else could Kane say? "You're welcome, Ace." Kuma's gaze fell on the black-haired boy trailing behind Ace. "Is that Dragon's son?" he wondered. Kuma, a veteran of the Revolutionary Army's circles, knew how Dragon watched Windmill Village. It wasn't just interest in a hometown. It suggested someone important was here. Seeing Luffy, a resemblance to Dragon in face and expression, made Kuma think the mystery might be solved. He felt no surprise, only a wish to forget. Dragon's name was a burden that could make life harder for this child. Far away, on Garp Mountain at the bandits' home, the bandits were unsure. "Boss, are we really not going to see Ace off?" one asked. "No." Don snorted, but couldn't keep the softness from showing. "It's hard enough to get rid of this burden. I'm too busy celebrating." The bandits exchanged knowing looks. Their big sister acted gruff, but had a soft heart. Before Ace left, she'd packed a ridiculous bundle of things for him, as if she could have fit the whole bandit's home into it. "But this might be the last time we see Ace," one said. "Yeah, the sea is dangerous. He's young. Who knows?" another muttered. They put on solemn faces and exaggerated sighs. "You bunch of bastards, what stupid things are you saying? How could that kid die so easily?" Dan roared, grabbing a wine bottle as if to smash it, but she was on her feet already, voice shaking. No matter what, that kid was raised by us. We have to see him off." "Yes, big sister," the bandits rallied, laughter under their bravado. Back on the pier, Luffy waved and shouted, "Ace, Don't forget our promise. Don't worry, I won't die until you become an excellent pirate, Ace yelled back. Kane inwardly winced at the flag that was. A crowd had gathered, Luffy, Makino, and other villagers. Ace had been a handful, mischievous, loud, but after years together, everyone had grown used to him. Little Ace, have a safe journey, they called, waving. I've caused you all trouble these past years, Ace said, bowing deeply, both smiling and on the verge of tears. He thanked everyone one by one, but his feet felt rooted. He kept turning toward the mountain path, unwilling to move. After a long silence, he finally stepped onto the ship. Aren't you going to wait a bit longer? Kane asked. No need, Ace pretended not to care. I already said proper goodbyes. Still, his eyes flicked toward the mountain path. Kane's observation hockey caught movement in the distance, and a smile touched his mouth. Huss! Dust rolled down the mountain road as Dadan and the bandits came barreling toward the pier, tumbling and scrambling as they ran. Ace! Ace! They shouted in a ragged chorus. Dadan! Everyone! Ace's tears broke loose. In a heartbeat, the bandits reached the pier, breathless. Dadan sucked in a huge breath and shouted at the top of her lungs. You brat! Stay safe and sound! You hear me? The others said little, just waved frantically, leaving the final words to Dadan and Ace. I will! Ace forced a brilliant smile through the tears. Thank you for taking care of me all these years. You scoundrel! Don't say that before you go. Dadan couldn't hold it anymore and began to cry. Ace looked at her as if to imprint her face into his memory. In this world, there were people who cared for him. All right, lads, set sail, Kane called, turning to give the order. Then, like thunder crashing across the bay, a voice roared. Ace! Luffy! I'm back! Chapter 74. Garp arrives far out at sea. A dog-headed warship was closing in fast. On the foredeck, an old man as broad as an iron tower stood with his arms folded atop the carved canine head, his dog-eared cap pulled low. Well, it looks like we really ran into trouble this time, he said. Kane called it trouble, but his face stayed calm, even a little amused. Was Garp strong? Of course. He and Roger had teamed up to take down the Rock's pirates at God Valley. Later, he and Sengoku had joined forces against the Golden Lion at Marineford. Those were the deeds that made his name. Even after the jokes and nicknames, Double Team King, Precocious Garp, his strength was unquestionable. Calamity Kane, what do you intend to do to my precious grandson? Garp bellowed. His gaze locked onto Ace on the deck, and the roar hit like thunder. Too slow, Garp snapped, impatient. Suddenly, he leapt high, his right fist clenched, and drove it downwards toward the warship. Boom! His punch slammed into the sea. Under Garp's control, the impact didn't smash the water's surface so much as make it behave like a trampoline. The dog-headed warship rebounded, shot upward, and barreled toward the massive Rayquaza like a projectile. Violet gasped, hand to her mouth. The warship crashed back into the sea with a titanic splash, sending towering waves dozens of meters high. The recoil slammed the Rayquaza hard. The great vessel shuddered. Garp himself dropped onto the Rayquaza's deck. Standing before him, grinning, Kane chuckled. Vice Admiral Garp, don't stand in the way of young people's dreams. That right, old man. I've decided to join Kane's crew and overturn this rotten era, Ace called, voice steady and defiant. The sight of the marine legend arguing with Roger's son made Garp's veins throb with fury. You damned brat! How dare you speak so brazenly? Thud. Garp gave Ace a crushing, affectionate fist that left a large bump on his forehead. You and Luffy are meant to join the Marines and protect the peace with me. Everyone who knew Ace's background froze. Was the legendary Garp really that reckless? Not only had he acknowledged the Pirate King's son as his grandson, he now proposed recruiting him into the Marines. Would the higher-ups stand for it? Kane, however, could see a use in the madness. The Pirate King's heir joining the Marines would be the kind of propaganda that could shake the whole world. If Ace grew strong enough, why not an admiral's post? If not, the Marines would surely find a banner position for him. The world government was tolerant of power when it could be turned to advantage. They'd even considered pulling Loki into the Celestial Dragons. An admiral would be small in comparison. Luffy was a different matter. Roger had wanted to challenge the world government. Dragon wanted to overturn it. If the Revolutionary Army succeeded, kidnapping Luffy to force Dragon's hand was an old, familiar tactic. The world government used it in Elbaf. They knew how to play that game. No, I want to be a pirate. Ace clutched at his forehead and said it fiercely. Me too, Luffy shouted, refusing to be outdone. I'm going to be king of the pirates, Kuma watched, scratching his head. Vice Admiral Garp's parenting left something to be desired, clearly. Ah, you two brats! Garp's beard bristled and his eyes flashed. A surge of dark, bruising haki rolled off him like a tide, and the air itself seemed to harden. Looks like he really pissed off the old man. Kane snorted. If his own carefully groomed successor had been snatched away to follow another path, he'd be furious too. Are we going to fight? Yamato's eyes lit up as she drew her spiked club. Kazuki Hiyori and the others tensed, ready for a clash. On the dog-headed ship, Garp's adjutant Bogato leaped down and took a position beside him, hand already at his sword hilt. Swords were drawn and bows bent across the decks. The atmosphere chilled to a blade's edge. Kane, unruffled, said quietly, Vice Admiral Garp, a battle here would be bad news. Garp, still burning with rage, hesitated. He glanced around. Villagers were nearby, and Windmill Village wasn't far off. If they clashed here, the village, his hometown where he'd grown up and where childhood friends still lived, would be in danger. He couldn't simply let Kane go, though. How about somewhere else? Kane suggested, pointing to the distant Gorp Mountain. If reasoning didn't work, a fight would. It was the only way to settle things for good. All right. Garp's fist creaked as he tightened it, rage flaring back up. Then this old man will teach you, you brat who doesn't know how vast the world is. Lord Kane, Vice Admiral Garp. Both sides cried out in warning, but neither could stop what was coming. The two figures vanished from the Rayquaza in an instant, streaks of motion so fast they were barely visible, and shot toward the Gorp Mountains. Deep in Gorp Mountain, the two finally faced off. Let this old man see how strong the young are these days, Garp roared, his right fist coating itself in a dark tide of armament haki. Kane narrowed his eyes at the surging, crackling haki. He wasn't weak either. In a flash, he shifted into his beast-human form, no probing, no flashy preliminaries. Fist met claw as Kane lunged. The impact was apocalyptic. A black fist and a blackened dragon claw collided with a thunderous boom, like two meteors striking. A visible shockwave rippled outward, shearing trees like twigs and scraping the earth's surface. The force of that single crash carved a massive circular clearing out of the mountain. Thump, thump, both were thrown back several steps. That's quite a punch, old man, Kane laughed, rubbing his numb right hand, exhilarated. Less talk, go rot and impel down and savor it slowly. Garp snarled and charged again. I really don't want to go to a place like that. Kane shot back and swung his fist at Garp. Chapter 75, Battle with Garp Windmill Village Docks. Everyone stared toward Garp Mountain as an apocalyptic scene unfolded. Thunderous impacts echoed, smoke and dust shot into the sky, and the very ground under their feet trembled. Oh no, our wooden house! Dodon's face went ashen. Her bandit hideout wasn't far from the epicenter. It was getting worse by the minute. Bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Those still aboard the Raikugo couldn't get to the battlefield, so all eyes turned to Violet, the only one who could see over a long distance. She frowned. I can't make it out. They're too fast and the smoke's too thick. Look, the sky, Sanji shouted, pointing upward. Ace and Luffy instinctively followed his finger and froze. Around the Garp Mountain battlefield, the clouds looked as if an invisible hand had ripped a massive hole through them. At the rim of that hole, the clouds were being sucked apart in plain view. Deep within the mountain, the fight had reached a fever pitch. Fistbone, Draco Meteor, continuous Dragon Claw. Garp's fists blurred into a rain of dark afterimages. Kane's dragon claws slashed through the air like sharpened blades. Their strikes collided, and the already strained ground finally gave way, collapsing and sinking in a vast section beneath them. Fists and claws slammed into flesh. Both combatants were thrown back over 100 meters, crashing into a stand of trees. Cough, cough! Kane pushed away splintered wood and wiped blood from his mouth. Garp, even in his old age, was frighteningly tough. Youth was an advantage, Kane knew that, but this old Marine still had plenty of fight left. Dragon Pulse, Kane roared. A blinding shockwave of light tore toward the spot where Garp had been sent flying. A thunderous blast followed, a mushroom cloud blooming where the attack landed. The strike had seemed effective, Yet Kane's observation hockey failed to detect Garp's presence inside the explosion. "He's above!" Kane's head snapped up. Garp had leapt high into the air. His marine coat was in tatters from the clash, but his grin was all the broader for it. "Kid, take this from me." Garp raised his dark right fist, veins bulging as he tore the last of his sleeve. Fistbone tackle. Before the fist fell, wind pressure slammed outward, pinning Kane to the ground. Trees and boulders within dozens of meters exploded into fragments. Time seemed to slow as the dark iron fist bore down in Kane's vision. Boom! The impact was cataclysmic. The earth exploded outward, leaving a crater more than 100 meters across and tens deep. From the Windmill Village docks, people watched in horror as the mountains seemed to have been flattened. Dedan stood dumbstruck. Her bandit home, Garp Mountain, had been crushed. The fate of the hideout barely registered. Without a mountain, was there even a bandit home anymore? Garp landed lightly on the edge of the great pit. He peered into the crater. No sign of life showed from the center. He didn't believe Kane was dead so easily. A casual voice came from behind him. "Phew, you really scared me." Garp turned. Kane was standing, disheveled and bloodied, but very much alive. So the fight would go on. Garp immediately swung again, but Kane no longer wanted a straight slugfest. After trading blows, he'd learned that in a stand-up fight with someone who'd done nothing but train in hand-to-hand combat his whole life, he couldn't win. It was time to use flashier methods. Kane pushed off, launching himself skyward, and gathered power in his mouth. Swift! A barrage of star-shaped energy projectiles rained down in dense sheets, sealing off any escape. Garp crossed his arms and saturated his body in dark armament hockey. The projectiles detonated against him one after another, arms, chest, legs, each hit exploding in a flaring light that churned dust and smoke around him. Kane pressed the assault. "Fire blast!" he roared. A cross-shaped tongue of superheated flames spewed from his maw, forming a towering column of fire where Garp stood. Next, air blade! Kane swung his dragon claws, sending a storm of compressed air blades slicing toward Garp. A roar answered from the smoke and ashes. Suddenly, a dark figure burst free, too close. Kane's observation hockey screamed a warning, but his body was already too late. A heavy, dark hand shot out and closed over Kane's forehead. Black-red hockey crackled along the arm that gripped him. Kane clenched at the hand, straining to pry free. He realized an outright breakaway was impossible. If he couldn't pull away, he would trade blows. Hyper beam! Kane unleashed a devastating concentrated beam from his mouth. Ocean floor drop. Garp countered at point-blank range. At the contact, both attacks detonated. The destructive beam slammed into Garp's chest and sent him flying backward like a broken kite. The force transmitted through Garp's palm hammered Kane as if his skull had been struck by a head-on train. Brutal, unrelenting force burned into his body. The ground beneath them shattered with a thunderous crack as Kane was driven into the earth. A massive shockwave ripped across the Garp mountain range, sweeping outward toward Windmill Village. Ugh! That wind! Sanji and Zoro fought to keep their footing, bracing on the ship's railings. When the dust finally settled at the center of the battlefield, a dragon claw tore at the edge of the pit and hauled a battered figure upward. Kane staggered out, tall, bloodied, and panting, his dragon claw digging into the earth for balance. He hadn't expected Garp to hit that hard. The older generation's strength was not to be underestimated. Kane pushed himself upright and looked across at Garp. The Marine lay on his back on shattered ground, his chest blackened and seared. Garp cracked an eye open and hauled himself up with visible effort. He was hurt, but only marginally worse off than Kane had been. Garp knew from their exchange he could suppress Kane for the moment, but in a battle of attrition, the advantage would swing the other way. Time favored the younger fighter. Age was a corrosive enemy. Even 5 or 10 years earlier, Garp might have been confident in victory. Now, things were different. Kane walked over without regard for rank or old scores and sat down beside him. "Old man," he said quietly, "how about we talk?" Garp let his eyelids droop halfway. He said nothing. Chapter 76, Luffy's Altered Fate. Roger's son joining the Marines, that's a terrible idea. Kane's voice hit Garp like a bolt from the blue. "How did you find out? Was it Ace?" Garp's fists tightened instinctively. He could not let that secret get out, not even if it cost him everything. Kane waved a hand as if to dismiss Garp's anger. Save it, old man. Once a secret is known by one more person, it's no longer a secret. I don't care what your motives are. I'll never let you use Ace's identity for your schemes. Garp's eyes widened and a cold thread of menace ran through him. Don't worry, I consider Ace a comrade. Kane kept talking, unconcerned whether Garp believed him or not. You say you want Ace in the Marines to uphold justice, but does the Marine truly stand for justice? You should know the darkness of this world as well as I do, Garp retorted. Kane locked eyes with him, enunciating each word. No matter how inhumane the world government is, they're still better than you pirate scum. Garp didn't hide his contempt for the world government. Kane only scoffed. No matter how bad pirates can be, can you point to many cases of them wiping out an entire country? Do I even need to remind you? The Celestial Dragon's hunting expeditions every 3 years. Kane crossed his arms and shook his head. Tsk, tsk. Every few years, an island gets erased from the sea and brought under the world government's control. If it hadn't been for rocks, maybe those hunts would still be happening. Tell me, old man, if the people of the sea knew the truth, would they support the Marines, who claim justice, or the pirates, who are called evil? Garp's expression hardened, and his fists unclenched slowly. It was precisely because he had seen the Celestial Dragons depravity that he'd long refused promotion to admiral. An admiral would have to defend those monsters. Besides those hunts, there's the slave trade. The Celestial Dragons have always bankrolled it, and there's the heavenly tribute system. Kane shook his head with a bitter sigh. The things the Celestial Dragons have done would take you 3 days and nights to even begin to list. Garp snorted coldly. So you want to hand the world over to scoundrels? At his age, he wouldn't be swayed by words alone. Order, however flawed, was still order. With the Marines, people at sea had at least some protection. Without them, the lawless would run rampant. Garp had spent decades facing pirates who pillaged, murdered, and left nothing but ruin. The Celestial Dragons rarely set foot outside Mary Geoise and the Sabaody archipelago. In remote seas, their damage paled beside that of brutal pirates. Why not? Kane countered. The territories under the New World Emperors aren't any worse off than most allied nations. There was no need to spell it out. Whitebeard's domains barely starved. He collected protection money to keep his fleet afloat and his people safe. Shanks's territory was similar. Big Mom's Totoland, though harsh with its peculiar demands, every citizen surrendering a month of their life every 6 months, still offered protection. In the deadly New World, safety was a rare commodity. Beyond that, Totoland didn't exploit its citizens as brutally as the Celestial Dragons. In a world of monsters, Charlotte Linland could even be seen as an effective ruler. Kane shrugged. Pirates are pirates, but you won't convince me by talking. Garp was unmoved. The world government held sway not through benevolent rule, but through naked force. It doesn't matter. Sooner or later, I'll overthrow the Celestial Dragon's rule. Time will prove me right. Kane had said his piece. He pushed himself up and patted his backside, standing. His words were as much for Garp as for an unnamed king watching from above. Aren't you worried I'll report all this to the world government? The beast pirates would be destroyed. Garp answered coldly. Do as you please. Kaido might even welcome it. He's always craved a war that consumes the world. Kane smiled lightly. Worst case, I join your son. The Revolutionary Army hasn't been wiped out all this time for nothing. They're masters at hiding. Size has its drawbacks. A massive ship is hard to turn. The world government looks vast, but its ancient bureaucracy is bloated and slow. Dragon has openly defied them for years and remains alive. They can't touch him, and the Revolutionary Army's losses have been far smaller than those inflicted by Blackbeard. At least Blackbeard attacked them directly. Leave Ace to me. I hate this world just as much as you do. With that, Kane waved and walked away. Garp's hands clenched and unclenched, but he didn't follow. As Kane disappeared from sight, a gust of wind cut through the air. Dragon drifted in on it. You dare appear before me? Garp snapped. Fist of love. Garp exploded at the sight of his son. The sudden surge of anger pushed his tired strength back into his limbs. He threw a punch. Dad, can't we just talk? Dragon said with a strained smile, not daring to fight back, only parrying and dodging. They brawled for a few minutes, father and son tumbling and trading blows until Garp was breathless. Dragon's voice was calm when he spoke. Dad, times have changed. The Marines are less and less able to represent justice. It's not your place to lecture me, brat. Garp roared. Dragon didn't press the argument. He knew he was stubborn too, and sometimes force alone wouldn't change his father. I only came to tell you one thing. A breeze picked him up again. The wind of a new era has already begun to blow. Then Dragon vanished into the air. After listening to Kane, he had decided to make contact with the Beast Pirates. Kane was right. The Revolutionary Army needed weapons. But first Dragon planned to inspect Wano Country in person and see how deep any cooperation with Kane should run. Garp stood rooted where he was, staring after the fading wind. He couldn't let Luffy keep fooling around in Windmill Village. In just a few years, 2 waves of great pirates had come through, and look how badly they'd corrupted his precious grandson. He made up his mind. He would keep Luffy close and personally guide him. With Garp's teaching and constant supervision, the boy would surely grow into an outstanding Marine. Chapter 77, The Ripples Stirred in the World Windmill Village Pier. I'm back. It didn't take long for Kane to return. Kane, how was the fight? Yamato asked, hopping off the deck with barely contained excitement. Everyone aboard the Rayquaza watched with bated breath. Kane grinned. Ace can come with us now. A roar of cheers erupted across the ship. Kane hadn't needed to explain further. The result spoke for itself. Some cheered his victory. Others winced. On the Doghead battleship, where the Marines waited anxiously, tension boiled over when only Kane returned. Heavenly disaster, Kane. What did you do to Vice Admiral Garp? A Marine demanded. Bogato's hand went to his sword hilt, ready to draw if anyone tried anything. Kane shrugged. Don't worry, he's alive, just a little banged up. Bogato relaxed enough not to attack. He ordered the ship's doctor to accompany him to Garp immediately and barked strict orders that no Marine lay a finger on Kane. Little ones, let's go. Kane called back to the crew and strode away. This time, no one tried to stop him. When Bogato and his men reached Garp, they found the old man out cold on the deck, snoring and blowing snot bubbles. Bogato let out a long breath of relief. The injuries were severe, but Garp was not in mortal danger. Quick, give the Vice Admiral something to eat, he ordered. They split into 2 teams, one to bandage Garp's wounds and the other to feed him. Garp, even asleep, did what he always did. He ate instinctively. By the next day, Garp had recovered enough to be his cantankerous self again. The first thing he did was kick and shout like a spoiled child. No, let me go! I don't want to be a Marine. I want to be the Pirate King. Garp pinched Luffy by the back of the neck and hauled him straight to the Doghead battleship. Luffy struggled and protested with all the stubbornness of a cat, but he couldn't escape Garp's iron grip. Fist of love, Garp growled, and one merciless punch later, Luffy collapsed into a baby-like sleep. With Luffy taken care of, the news of the fight sent ripples across the seas. Shocking! Pirate King's successor appears, screamed the headline of the World Economic Journal. On the Rayquaza's deck, Kane wagged a finger at the freshly printed paper, his face darkening and his jaw clenching. Morgans, you bird brain. The headline misrepresented the fight. Morgans hadn't written that Kane defeated Garp outright, only that Kane had escaped from Garp unharmed. But Morgans went further, comparing the incident to the day Garp chased Roger, implying that Roger had escaped Garp as well. The insinuation, Roger equals Kane, was infuriating. Kane finally understood what a killing stroke without bloodshed could do. It shaped legends. The report also had an immediate effect on Kane's wanted poster. His bounty shot up to an astronomical 1 billion berries, vaulting him past Queen. Queen, holding the paper, crumpled it in his fat hands, his face quivering with rage. How did this brat's bounty climb so fast? It was the only thing Queen had left to measure himself against, now gone. He muttered darkly about inventing more terrifying virus bombs. King, however, merely shrugged. Not surprising. If he can go toe-to-toe with Garp, a high bounty is expected. Nearby, Kaido was less composed, chugging sake and wailing, Garp, you old geezer, have you really gotten weaker? Far away in the New World, on a battlefield the red hair pirates had been contesting, Shanks ended the fighting with a single decisive slash. During the lull, Ben Beckman approached his captain, who was resting on a rock with a newspaper. That kid from the Beasts is causing a stir, Ben said. Shanks laughed at Morgan's flair for the dramatic, but his expression sobered as he examined the photo of the battlefield. Windmill Village. He frowned. Luffy, the boy he favored as a successor of Roger, had been there. Ben picked up on his captain's concern, blowing a smoke ring. Should we contact Windmill Village? Quietly, so the Marines don't notice. Shanks was silent for a while, staring out to sea. Then he shook his head slowly. The main battle wasn't at Windmill Village. With Garp there, Luffy and the others will be fine. If Luffy was truly the sort of man his captain had waited for, nothing more needed to be done. They would wait and see. On another sea in the New World, aboard the Moby Dick, members of the Whitebeard pirates were also reading the papers. Morgan's really goes too far, calling out a Pirate King successor, someone snorted. Only our old man can be the Pirate King, came the jeer, and the crew laughed at Morgan's supposed unreliability. Whitebeard sat in his massive custom chair, an IV drip in his arm, the newspaper in his hands. A trace of sadness flickered across his face. He could feel himself fading. His peak was receding further. Old wounds flared, and he needed medication now just to keep his body going. How much longer could he sail like this? Marco, checking on him, noticed the melancholy and softly asked, "Old man?" Whitebeard buried the sadness and put on his boisterous grin. "What is it, Marco?" "Your health, it's recovering well," Marco said, and Whitebeard laughed in his deep, rolling way. "Grrrah, of course," he boomed. "I still want to see you all get married." "Then Marco has to get married first," teased one of the commanders. "Who would fall for a pineapple head?" Someone else shot back, and the ship was filled with good-natured laughter again. Back on the Raikugo, Ace scowled at the training plan. "I have to train with them?" he snapped, pointing at Sanji and Zoro, hands on his hips. He frowned with teenage pride. "I don't need those childish exercises. I want to get stronger, fast." At 15, Ace had already fought across the mountains of the Goa Kingdom and claimed victory over savage beasts, which often ended up as his meals. Basic drills felt like a waste of time to him, tedious and unnecessary when he wanted results now. Chapter 78, Return to Wano Country. "You're strong?" Kane cracked a smile. "Of course," Ace answered, as if it were obvious. "Then how about you spar with Sanji?" Kane rested his chin on one hand, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Then I won't hold back." Seeing Sanji was about his age and height, Ace didn't bother with formalities. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed forward. In the gray terminal of Goa Kingdom, he'd fought fierce pirates who'd been no match for him. This should be easy. Then, bang! Ace was hurled backwards and slammed hard into the deck. "How is that possible?" Ace cried, grimacing in pain as he stared at Sanji, who had simply withdrawn his leg and wore a casual, almost bored expression. Ace's strikes had been telegraphed and easily avoided, but Sanji's movements hadn't registered at all. Could an apprentice pirate on this ship really be that strong? "Now you know the difference," Kane said without surprise. Even if Sanji hadn't fully awakened his armament yet, the intense training he'd been doing wasn't for nothing. Ace, by contrast, had been somewhat overlooked over the years. Garp's survival-style upbringing had forged Ace's body and given him countless wild combat experiences, but without systematic hockey and martial arts instruction, Ace was like an uncut gem, full of raw potential, but unable to turn it into real fighting strength. "I'll work harder," Ace said, clapping his hands and flipping back to his feet. There was no dejection in him, only an unfamiliar excitement. Seeing how far he could still grow thrilled him more than a single failure could dismay him. Ace joined Sanji and Zoro's training team, and time slipped by in the rhythm of sweat and the sound of blows. After crossing Reverse Mountain, Kane's group re-entered the New World. Violet frowned slightly at the change in atmosphere. "The New World feels different," she said. Kane stood at the bow and spoke calmly. "That's natural. A new emperor is trying to assert himself." By the story's progression, Shanks was expected to become a Yonko next year. The era of 3 emperors would be ending, and a 4 emperors period beginning. It was October of the sea calendar 1517. Shanks's influence was snowballing, and his strong-willed subordinates were likely eager to push him to that ultimate position. Now all he needed was a war to prove he deserved it, an event to announce the coming of a new era. Who he would pick as an opponent was another question entirely. A few days later, the crew came upon a spectacle that left everyone breathless. Wow, what a huge waterfall! Bonnie leaned over the rail, flushed with excitement as she stared at the mind-bending sight. A massive sheet of water that seemed to flow upward like a curtain between heaven and earth. Ace, Sanji, and Zoro tried to look composed, but their wide eyes and slightly open mouths betrayed them. Kane smiled. If we pass through that waterfall, we'll reach Wano through the submerged harbor. The Raikugo slipped through the waterfall and sailed on to Onigashima without incident. Kane arranged for Kozuki Hiyori to find lodgings for Ace, Sanji, and Zoro, and then he took Kuma and Bonnie into Wano Country proper. Wow, it turned into a dragon. Bonnie's eyes went wide. It was her first time seeing Kane transform. Hold on tight. Kane's dragon claw cradled Kuma and Bonnie gently, lifting them into the air and speeding toward the Kibi region. In less than an hour, they were above a lush, vibrant forest, the vegetation dense and thriving under the care of the Tontata tribe. Bonnie suddenly pointed excitedly at what looked like a distant, snow-capped peak. Kane, big brother, is there a snowy mountain here? She asked. Kane peered down and immediately understood why she'd mistaken it. It wasn't a mountain at all, but a colossal, pure white creature the size of a small peak, a mountain god, a giant white boar unique to Wano. He hadn't expected it to be so close to the Tontata settlement, but curiosity made him land to take a closer look. They touched down, and Bonnie could only gasp. The mountain god's bulk was like a moving hill, its tusks enormous. She hid behind her father, showing only part of her face. So big. Don't be scared, Bonnie, Kuma soothed, tracing a paw over her back. It's just a boar with a very special build. The mountain god had felt the newcomers. It rose slowly, like a small mountain lifting from the earth, and let out a warning grunt. Kane's gaze sharpened, and he released a terrifying, domineering aura toward the creature. The boar swayed, made a few puzzled noises, as if intoxicated, and then toppled over in a shower of dust, immediately sinking into a deep sleep. Sharp, urgent whistles cut through the forest. Warning! Warning! Mama Mountain is down! Enemy invaders! A rustle of tiny feet heralded the arrival of the mountain god's offspring, smaller, several meters tall, pure white boarlets, rushing from the trees in a flurry. Bonnie clung to her father's leg, trembling. Mr. Kane? Kuma raised his paw. The pad glowed faintly, ready. Kane, however, simply patted Kuma's shoulder. Don't worry, they're friendly. As the boarlets charged within tens of meters, new voices rang out from the tree line. Stop! Stop! It's Kane Landau! Under soothing calls from the Tontata, the boarlets slowed and trooped forward. A Tontata warrior wearing a green cap sprang nimbly from the leading boar's thick fur and saluted. Long time no see, Kane Landau, he said. Long time no see, Leo. Kane returned the salute. That's amazing, Kane praised. Just a few months and you've already got Mama Mountain and her children trained. The Tontata had an extraordinary knack for taming animals. Leo shrugged and rubbed his cap. We help feed Mama Mountain's young, and they help guard the forest. Are those the Tontata? Bonnie's fear melted into curiosity. She eased away from her father and edged closer, wide-eyed. They look just like the picture books. Chapter 79, Bonnie's Healing. Leo finally noticed Kuma and Bonnie and asked, puzzled, Kane Landau, who are they? This little one, Bonnie, has a terminal illness. She came hoping for Princess Manchuri's help. Kane's face was grave. It's a terrible thing. Leo's small face filled with concern. He leaped onto the head of a little pig and waved them on eagerly. Come with me. Princess Manchuri is inside. They followed Leo deeper into the forest. Even the well-traveled Kuma was stunned by what he found. All around them, in the lush clearing, denden mushi of every shape and size dotted the foliage. Communication denden mushi, black ones, white ones, almost every type Kuma knew was there. It looks like we can prepare the first shipment, Kane said with satisfaction. After years of careful cultivation by the Tontata tribe, large-scale, sustainable breeding of denden mushi had finally become a reality. Kane felt proud. The era of relying on inefficient, costly wild capture was about to be over. Mr. Kane, are you going to sell denden mushi? Kuma asked, trying to hide his astonishment. That's the plan, Kane replied. I want to drive the price down so everyone can afford them. He nodded. Denden mushi were scarce in this world. Ordinary civilians rarely had them, and even the Marines couldn't equip everyone. It was an untapped market. But now was not the time for business talk. In the sunlit center of the forest clearing, they found Princess Mancherry. The tiny princess was tending to a giant Den Mushi that had been injured in a fight. "Don't worry, Mr. Den Mushi. It won't hurt for long," she murmured. Mancherry climbed lightly to the injured spot, closed her eyes, and let tears fall. The wounds on the Den Mushi's shell and flesh knit visibly, closing fast. Kuma's hope, which had been flickering for so long, flared to life. "Princess!" Leo hurriedly explained what had happened. "I know," Mancherry said without hesitation. She vaulted onto Bonnie's shoulder and reached for the crystalline growths that marred the girl's face. "This must be very uncomfortable," she whispered. "But it'll be all right. You'll get better." Mancherry clasped her hands and shut her eyes. The air grew heavy. Kuma held his breath as if awaiting a verdict of fate. If even this miracle fruit's power couldn't cure Bonnie, he didn't know where else to turn. "Healing tears," Mancherry said, and warm drops fell from her cheeks onto Bonnie's neck. A comforting current flowed from Bonnie's neck through her whole body. She froze, afraid to move and ruin whatever was happening. Then Kuma's voice trembled with joy. "Oh, Bonnie, your face!" Bonnie raised a hand to her cheek. Where the rough, cold crystals had been, her skin was now smooth and delicate. She fumbled at every place the crystals used to cover. Everywhere they were gone, completely gone. "Dad, I think I'm better," she whispered, voice shaking. Tears blurred her eyes, but a bright smile spread across her face. "Yes, yes!" Kuma couldn't contain himself. Hot tears streamed down his face. "My Bonnie, you're better!" Father and daughter clung to each other and sobbed, years of pain, fear, and despair pouring out in a wave of relief. Kane and Mancherry watched, moved. "Thank you, Mancherry," Kane said quietly. "It's nothing, Kane Lando," the little princess replied, smiling genuinely at the reunited pair. This was exactly the scene she had hoped for. When their sobs subsided, Kuma and Bonnie wiped their faces and bowed deeply to Kane and Princess Mancherry in gratitude. "All right," Kane said, smiling. "Let Bonnie feel the sun." Kuma shivered, as if waking from a long sleep. He gently peeled back the hood that had hidden Bonnie's face for so long. She closed her eyes and let the long mist sunlight warm her features. "Dad, it feels so good," she said. Kuma looked at Kane with solemn gratitude. "Mr. Kane, please take care of us from now on." "You're welcome to be my companion, Kuma." Kane smiled and offered his hand. One large palm met one small one. After seeing Kuma and Bonnie settled, Kane left to report to his leader. Back at base, he found Kaido unusually sober and handling official business. The beast pirates had duties even Kaido didn't ignore completely, and today he seemed unexpectedly focused. Beside him stood a slender woman wearing a white paper mask with eyes drawn on it. She shuffled documents and offered advice. This was Bao Huang, Kaido's personal secretary. "You brought back quite a few people this time, kid," Kaido said. Kane gave a quick rundown. "Sanji is the Vinsmoke family's greatest product, Zoro has exceptional sword talent, and Ace, he's Roger's son. He's very gifted too." Kaido barely reacted to Sanji and Zoro, but when Kane mentioned Ace's parentage, he threw his head back and laughed. "Waha! Interesting. Roger entrusted his child to Garp at the last moment of his life? No wonder the Marines could never find Roger's heir," Kaido went on, chuckling. "The biggest mole was Garp." He laughed until he rocked in his seat, then reached for a sake gourd and drank. Bao Huang looked on helplessly. Kaido's whims were not easy to manage. "Since they have talent, you should train them well," Kaido said at last. "The more strength we have, the better." As expected, Kaido assigned Sanji, Zoro, and Ace to Kane's supervision. To Kaido, Ace being Roger's descendant was little more than an amusing detail, good company for a long drink, and another asset to be put to use. Chapter 80, Sanji's Triumphant Return. Just as Kane was about to take his leave, Kaido suddenly spoke up and stopped him. "Vinsmoke Judge, the one you found, has run into trouble with his artificial devil fruit research," Kaido said. "Since it's a project you started, you should take responsibility for fixing it." "I just got back," Kane sighed. "Understood." Kaido grunted without looking up, and he and Bao Huang fell back into their work. Watching them cooperate so efficiently, Kane stroked his chin. Maybe he should recruit a capable and attractive secretary. His responsibilities were multiplying. Speed, after all, was a fighter, and managing the Rayquaza was already a stretch. With that in mind, Kane made his way to the Vinsmoke family's stronghold on the west side of Onigashima. Judge had chosen to remain on his Den Den Mushi ship instead of coming ashore. As Kane entered the castle, he immediately saw a scuffle. Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji attacking Sanji. 3 against 1, Sanji was clearly at a disadvantage, but he refused to show weakness and kept probing for an opening. Reiju had only invited Sanji to the castle to take a look. She hadn't expected the 3 brothers to turn on him like this. "Stop fighting, all of you!" Reiju shouted, but her authority wasn't enough to silence Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji. Judge stood by, calmly stroking his beard, showing no sign of intervening. "Pfft, Sanji, you seem a bit stronger, don't you?" Ichiji sneered as his punch missed. "But a good-for-nothing is always a good-for-nothing." Yonji followed with a sweeping whip kick aimed at Sanji's lower body. "Let's see what makes you worthy of joining the Beast's pirates." When Sanji blocked, Niji seized the opening and cracked his fist into Sanji's temple. "Maybe Kane took you in just because he needed a cook. Ha! You don't seem to have any other talent." Sanji was sent flying. When he lifted his head, fury filled his eyes. "I won't let you insult Brother Kane." With bloodshot eyes, a surge of unfamiliar power exploded from him. He grabbed Niji's arm and slammed him into the ground. Boom! The stone floor caved in beneath the impact, a spiderweb of cracks fanning out to form a crater. Niji groaned at the bottom, unable to move. Judge's hand paused mid-stroke. Something was wrong, very wrong. Sanji, the weakest of the Vinsmoke children by every test Judge had ordered, could not possibly possess that kind of strength. He had always thought the data was conclusive. Yet the evidence before him was undeniable. Sanji was no longer the weak boy he remembered. Ichiji and Yonji frowned. They hadn't expected Sanji, who they'd been bullying in turn, to suddenly snap. Shock turned to rage. How dare he resist? The 2 brothers launched themselves at him. 2 heavy blows slammed into Sanji's chest. He only smirked. He felt better than he had in a long time. "Heh, is that all? You guys are a bit weak." Before they could react, Sanji had seized both their wrists and whirled like a spinning top. Spinning roast. After dozens of rapid rotations, he threw his weight and slammed them down. Bang! 2 more craters cracked the floor. Ichiji and Yonji howled in pain, blood leaking from the corners of their mouths. Sanji's strength had rattled their internal organs. Sanji smoothed his disheveled blonde hair, lit a cigarette, and took a satisfied drag. Reiju stood frozen. Was this really Sanji? She'd known he had been getting stronger, but not like this. "Damn it!" Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji cursed in unison. Although Sanji had not held back, their Germa exoskeletons weren't just for show. Their injuries were severe, but not incapacitating. They prepared to press the attack when leisurely applause echoed through the hall. Clap, clap, clap. Kane stepped forward, smiling. "Sanji, congratulations, you've fully awakened your lineage factor." "Brother Kane." Sanji's scowl melted instantly when he saw Kane. He scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Judge's expression shifted from incredulity to stunned realization. That's impossible. Sanji shouldn't have a chance to awaken his lineage factor. "Have you forgotten the raid suit?" Kane prompted. Since Sanji started wearing it, his development has accelerated every day. Judge relaxed marginally. He hadn't expected the raid suit to have that effect, but he still frowned. Even so, there's no reason for him to be this strong. It had only been a few days since Sanji received the raid suit. Even if he'd worn it constantly, he should still be years behind his brothers in terms of awakening. There was no clear reason he could so quickly overpower Ichiji and the others the moment he awakened. Kane smiled. "Perhaps Sanji is your greatest masterpiece." "Emotions are the most marvelous thing about humans," Kane continued. "You suppressed the emotions of Ichiji and the others. That certainly raised their floor, made them more consistent, but it also locked their ceiling." In Kane's experience, even in his previous life, powerful emotions could push a person beyond their perceived limits. Judge, who prided himself on science, looked baffled, but the idea planted a seed in his mind. The fight between Sanji and his brothers was only a brief interlude. Kane quickly shifted to business with Judge. "I need fierce beasts. The fiercer the better, and the more kinds, the better. Ordinary animals won't be useful for this research." Judge nodded. "The stronger the lineage factor used as a template in an artificial devil fruit, the stronger the resulting eater would be." It was simple logic, and Kane understood it well. He knew where to find such beasts. Rusukaina Island, near the Twin Snake Islands, the very place Luffy trained for 2 years and known for its savage wildlife. According to Rayleigh, more than 500 fierce creatures on that island could have defeated pre-time skip Luffy. There was also Kuraigana Island, where Hawkeye once lived, which had a number of Masira that had bested pre-time skip Zoro, but those had learned sword techniques from Hawkeye and weren't purely wild beasts. "I'll help you collect those beasts," Kane said. "For now, I can provide the blood of a powerful animal." He thought of the mountain god he had encountered, a wild boar that had withstood Odin's attack and refused to die. After arranging plans for the artificial devil fruit research, Kane hurried across Onigashima to the east side, where Queen's laboratory lay. He and Judge maintained a careful distance, an unspoken understanding, like two kings who could not meet.